Philetus and eager to change the subject, still Archias sent one of the servants to Charon, ordering him to come instantly. Now it was evening, and Philetus and his party were preparing themselves in the house, and PG9 had already got their
Good morning. I finally got on.
Suddenly,
That's a
a knock was
testament
heard at the door.
to
One of the men out,
ADHD. I need to get a more realistic schedule.
At once it occurred to all that the plot had been betrayed, and that they all were lost.
Yeah,
I've
neglected to well, maybe I just have to check one thing.
He was a man of courage, and slow to lose heart, but now he was panic-stricken and terrified lest when so many brave citizens lost their lives, some suspicion of treachery might rest on himself. So, just when he was going, he brought his son from a woman's apartments, a boy still, but in beauty and strength surpassing all of his own age, and handed him over to Philetus' party, bidding them treat him as an enemy and show no mercy, if they should find him guilty of any deceit or treachery. Many of them shed tears at the feeling shown by Charon, and his noble spirit, and all felt shame, that he should think any of them so base and so affected by their present danger, as to suspect him or even to blame him, and they begged him not to mix up his son with them, but put him out of the way of the coming stroke, that he might be safe and escape from the tyrants, and some day return and avenge his father and his friends. But Charon refused to take away his son. For what life, he asked, or what place of safety could be more honorable to him than an easy death with his father and so many friends? After praying and embracing them all, and bidding them be of good cheer, he went away, taking great pains to adopt a look and tone of voice as different as possible to that of a conspirator. X. When he came to the door, Archias and Philippus met him and said, Charon, I have heard that some people have come here, and are concealed in the city, and that some of the citizens are in league with them. Charon was at first disconcerted, but then inquired who these persons might be, and who they were that gave them shelter. Seeing then that Archias knew nothing for certain, he perceived that the news did not come from PG10, anyone who knew the truth. Take care, said he, that this be not a mere idle rumor that is alarming you. However, I will make due enquiries, for we ought not to disregard anything. Philetus, who was present, expressed his approval of this, and carrying Archias back again plied him with liquor, prolonging his deadlock by holding out the expectation of the women. Now when Charon returned to his house, he found the conspirators there prepared to fight, not expecting to survive or to win the day, but to die gloriously and kill as many of their enemies as possible. He told Philetus his party
killed me.
and made up some story about Archias to satisfy the others. The storm was just blown over when fortune sent a second upon them. A messenger came from Athens, from Archias at Hierophant 7, to his namesake Archias the Spartan, whose guest and friend he was, bearing a letter which contained no vague and conjectural suspicion, but a detailed account of all that was being done, as was afterwards discovered. Now the messenger, when brought before Archias who was drunk, gave him the letter, and said, He who sent you this letter begged you write it instantly, for he said it was written about most serious matters. Archias laughing, said, Serious matters tomorrow. He took the letter and placed it under the pillow on which he rested, and again listened to Philetus about what they were talking of before. The story, handed down in the form of a proverb, is current among the Greeks even now. As the hour for the attempt seemed now to have arrived, they sallied forth, in two bodies, the one, under Philetus and bound ones, to attack Leontidas and Hypates, who lived near one another, while the other, under Charon and Mela, was Archias and Philippus, with women's gowns over their steel corselets, and their faces concealed by degrees of firm pine wood. And so when first they entered the door of the dining room, they caused great applause and disturbance, as the guests imagined that the long-expected ladies had at length come. They looked carefully round the party, and having ascertained who the guests were, they directed the 11 swords, and made for Archias and Philippus. When they thus betrayed themselves, Philetus persuaded some few of the guests to remain quiet, but the rest, who rose and tried to assist the Polemarchs, were easily disposed of on account of their drunken condition. The task of Philetus and his party was a harder one, for they went to attack Leontidas, a sober and brave man, and, finding his house shut up, for he was already asleep, they knocked for some time without rousing anyone. At length the servant heard them and came and drew back the bolt of the door. Then, as soon as the leaves of the door yielded, they burst in a body, and upsetting the servant made for the bedchamber. Leontidas, guessing from the noise and confusion what was going on, started up and seized his dagger, but he forgot to put out the light, and make the men fall upon each other in the darkness. In full view of them,
help!
In a blaze of
Please
light,
don't kill
he met them at his chamber door, and with a blow of his dagger struck down Canthus' doors, the first man who entered. As he fell dead, Leontidas grabbed him with the next. The struggle was a fierce one and rendered difficult by the narrow passage in the course of Canthus' doors lying in it. But at night, Philetus gained the upper hand, and having dispatched him, immediately went with his party to attack Hypates. And in the same way they broke into his house, but he heard them sooner, and fled away to the neighbors, but was pursued and slain. XII. Having accomplished this, and joining Valens' party, they sent word to the remaining exiles in Edessa, and called together the citizens to complete their deliverance, and as they came, gave them arms, taking down the trophies which hung in the public colonnades, and breaking into the workshops of spear makers and sword cutlers. And Epaminondas and Gorgias, with their party, came to help them, armed. For they had collected together no small number of younger men and the strongest of the elder ones. By this time the whole city was roused, and there was great confusion, lights flitting about, and people running to one another's houses, but the people had not yet decided, that being alarmed at what had happened, and knowing nothing for certain, they waited BG12, for daylight. And here the generals of the least Roman garrison seemed to have missed an opportunity in not at once sallying out and attacking them, for the garrison itself consisted of 1,500 men, and many people kept running to them for refuge from the city. However, along with the shouts and cries and mass of people assembling from all parts, they remained calm, holding with the night only. At daybreak arrived the exiles from Edessa, for the arm, and the public assembly met. Epaminondas and Gorgias led forward a band of Philetus, surrounded by the priests, who crowned them with wreaths, and called upon the citizens to fight for their country and their gods. The whole assembly, with shouts and applause, rose at the sight, and received them as their benefactors and saviors. XIII. After this, Pelopidas, who was chosen lead Tarch, with Melon and Chiron as colleagues, at once blockaded the citadel, and made assaults upon it on all sides, being eager to drive out the Lacedaemonians and recover their command before an army should come upon them from Sparta. In so little time had he to spare, that the garrison, when going home after their capitulation, met at Leonidas, marching with a great force against Thebes. Of the 3 men who had been governors of Thebes, the Spartans condemned 2, Euripides and Archisus, to death, and the third, Lysimachus, was kept defined and banished. This adventure was called by the Greeks the sister of that of Thrasyllus, as it was held with the bravery and personal risk of its chief actors, and was,
trying to make
favored by
I
fortune.
couldn't make it.
It is difficult to mention any other persons, who with fewer numbers and conquered men more numerous and powerful than themselves, by sheer daring and ability, or who conferred greater blessings on their own countries. And that which made this more remarkable was the change which he effected. The war which destroyed the prestige of Sparta, and put an end to her empire by sea and land, began in PG 13, that night, in which Pelopidas, without having made himself master of any fort, stronghold, or citadel, but merely coming to a private house with 11 members, whose
You know what I was doing. You know who I was searching
the
for.
chains of Lacedaemonian supremacy,
Trying to do some healing.
XIV.
But it was foolish.
Now, when a great Lacedaemonian
I
army
need to
invaded the
adapt
city,
myself.
the Athenians manifested great alarm. They repudiated their alliance with the Thebans, and abused those who had shown these town sympathies. Some of these men were put to death, others fined and banished. The case of the Thebans seemed desperate, as no one offered to help them. But Pelopidas, who with forged his Tarch, contrived to alienate the Athenians from Sparta by the following plot. Scribnius, a Spartan, of great renown in wars, but somewhat flighty and prone to wild enterprises and reckless ambition, had enough mere rescue with an army to receive and assist those Thebans 9, who were now sent into exile because they favored the Lacedaemonians. Pelopidas sent secretly to this man and merchant, a friend of his own, who gave him a bribe, and also made proposals which fascinated him more than money, that he should attempt some enterprise on a great scale, and surprise Pyrrhus by a sudden attack when the Athenians were off their guard, for the Lacedaemonians would be better pleased with the capture of Athens than with anything else, and the Thebans would not assist them, for they were at variance with them and regarded them as traitors. At length Scribnius was prevailed upon to agree to this, and, with his soldiery, invaded Attica by night. He got as far as Eleusis, but there the soldiers lost heart, and a attack was detected. So, having involved the Spartans in a war of no slight importance, he retired to Thessaly. XV. Upon this the Athenians again most eagerly allied themselves with the Thebans, and, aspiring to supremacy at sea, sent embassies round to the other maritime states, PG 14, and brought over to their own side those who were willing to revolt from the Spartans. Meanwhile the Thebans, along in their country of Betia, constantly skirmishing with the Lacedaemonians, and not fighting any great battles with them, but organizing themselves with the greatest care and discipline, began to pluck up spirit, gaining skill and practice, and becoming confident from the result of these encounters. This was why they say that Antipater the Spartan, when King Aeschylus was being carried home wounded from Betia, said to him, "Indeed, you are receiving nice lessons from the Thebans, now that you have taught them how to fight against their will." But their real teacher was not Aeschylus, but those who, seizing fit opportunities, and with due management, skillfully used to let them loose upon their enemies, as in training young masters, and then when they had tasted victory and self-confidence brought them safely back. Of these leaders Pelopidas received the chief credit. From the year in which he was first elected general they never ceased to re-elect him, and he was always either in command of the sacred band or most commonly acting as lead Tarch until his death. There took place also about flat and festive defeats and loss of the Lacedaemonians, in which Pheius, who seized the Demia, perished. And Pelopidas ruled for a number of them years in Agra, in slew Amphipolis the governor. Still, although these skirmishes raised the spirits and confidence of the victors, yet they did not cast down the pride of the vanquished. For they were not regular battles, but the Thebans won their successes by well-timed charges and harassing the enemy by alternate or frequent advance. However, the fair Tegla, losing the men was given to Edluca,
one bullet.
For there was no question of any other general having assisted in the design of the battle, nor of the enemy being thoroughly looted. The city of Orchomenus had taken the Spartan side, and had received Timour's 10 of Spartan troops for its protection. He always had his eye upon this place, and watched this opportunity. Hearing that the garrison had made an expedition into Locris, he PG 15 marched, hoping to catch Orchomenus defenseless, taking with him the sacred band and the fleet cavalry. When he came to the city, he found that the garrison had been relieved by fresh troops from Sparta, and so he led off his men homewards through Tegla, the only way that he could.
How did that happen?
At the foot of the mountains. For the river Melos, which from its very source spreads into morasses and quagmires, made the direct way impassable. Near the marshes stands a temple of Apollo of Tegla and an oracle, which is now forsaken. It has not been long so, but flourished up to the Persian War, when Echecrates was priest. There the myths say that the god was born. And the neighboring mountain is called Delos, and there the overflowings of the river Melos cease, while behind the temple there flow 2 springs remarkable for the sweetness, coldness, and volume of their waters, which we up to this day call, the one the palm, and the other the olive, as though the goddess had not been delivered between 2 trees, but 2 fountains. Indeed, close by is the 2, whence they say that she was driven in terror by the sudden apparition of a wild boar, and with regard to the legends of Typhos and Pytho, the localities are in like manner associated with the birth of the god. I omit the greater part of these proofs, for our ancestral religion tells us that this god is not to be ranked among those divinities who were born as men, like Heracles and Dionysus, and by their merits were translated from this earthly and suffering body, but he is one of the eternal ones who know no birth, if one may form any conjecture upon such matters from the writings of our wisest and most ancient writers. XVII. At Tegla, then, Pelopidas and the Thebans retiring from Orchomenus met the Lacedaemonians marching back from Locris, in the opposite direction. When they were first discreet coming out from the narrow gorges of the hills, someone ran to Pelopidas, and cried out, "We have fallen into the midst of the enemy." Why so? Asked he. More than they into the midst of us. He at once ordered his cavalry to the front to charge the enemy first, and closed out his infantry. 300 in number, he
got a stun in there.
trusting that wherever he did G16, attack the enemy he should break through, although they outnumbered him. They consisted of 2 wars of Estonians. Now Evra says that a war consists of 500 men, but Kallisthenes says 700, and some other authorities, and amongst them Polybius, put it at 900.
Come isolate it.
The Polemarchs in command of the Spartans moved confidently to the attack of the Thebans. And the onset was directed on both sides, with great fury, especially of the persons of the leaders. The 2 Polemarchs dashed against Pelopidas, and both fell. Then the slaughter of their immediate followers produced panic in the whole horse, and it gave way to the Thebans, opening a lane through the center as if for them to pass through. But when Pelopidas led his men into the passage thus offered, and assailed those who stood their ground, passing through with great slaughter, then all fled in hopeless rout. The pursuit was not
too cold,
for the Thebans feared the vicinity of Fort Eminence and of the Spartan reinforcement there. But as far as winning the victory, and forcing their way through the beaten enemy, they were completely successful. So after setting up a trophy and spoiling the dead, they returned home in high spirits. For in all the wars which had previously taken place, both with Greeks and barbarians, it never before had happened that these enemies should be conquered by an inferior force, nor yet even when the numbers on each side were equal. Wherefore they were invincible in their own estimation, and established an ascendant over the minds of their opponents, for they were wont to engage with men who did not themselves think that an equal force they could be a match for the same number of Spartans. But this battle first proved to the rest of Greece that it is not only in Europe and the country that's well weak and Macedonian weapon, it nurtures brave and warlike men, but that wherever the youth of a nation fears disgrace and is willing to this fight for honor, and treats from shame more than danger, these form the troops most terrible to their foes. XVII. The Sacred Band, they say, was first formed by Gorgias, of 300 men, whom the city drilled in PG-17, whilst we had men on service, wherefore they were called the City Regiment. People whom generally called the Citadel City. Some say that this was also composed of many friends, and indeed there is current saying of the Athenians, that Homer's Mr. is not a good general when he bids the Greeks assembled by their tribes and clans. They tribe to tribe, and clan to clan give aid. Whereas he ought to have placed side by side men who loved each other, for men care little in time of danger for men of the same tribe or clan, whereas the bond of affection is one that cannot be broken, as men will stand fast in battle from the strength of their affection for others, and through feeling shame of showing themselves powerless before them. Nor is this to be wondered at, seeing that men stand more in all of the objects of their love when they are absent than who are others when present, as was the case with that man who begged and entreated one of the enemy to stab him from the breast as he lay wounded. He ordered, said he, that my friend may not see me lying dead with a wound in the back, and be ashamed of me. And Euryalus, the favorite of Heracles, is said to have taken part in his labors and have accompanied him. And Aristotle says that even in his own time lovers would make their vows at the tomb of Euryalus. It is probable.
I was in trouble there.
Because Plato also speaks of a lover as a friend inspired from heaven. After the battle of Chaeronea, it is said to have continued invincible, and when Philip stood after the battle viewing the slain, in that part of the field where the 300 lay dead in their armor, heaped upon one another, having met the spears of his Philippics face to face, he wondered at the sight, and learning that it was the band of lovers, burst into tears, and said, perish those who suspect those men of doing or enduring anything base. XIX. As to these intimacies between friends, it was not, as the poets say, the disaster of Deus which first introduced the custom of these, but their lawgivers, wishing to soften and improve the natural violence of PG-18, ferocity of their passions, use music largely in their education, both in sport and earnest, giving the flute a special honor, and handsomely used together in the patois, produced many glorious examples of mutual affection. Rightly too did they establish in their city that Goddess who is said to be the daughter of Ares and Aphrodite, Harmonia. Since, wherever warlike power is really blended with eloquence and refinement, there all things tend to the formation of a harmonious and perfect commonwealth. Now, as to the Sacred Band, Gorgias originally placed them in the first rank, and so spread them all along the first line of battle, and did not by this means render their valor so conspicuous, nor did he use them in a mass for any attack, but their courage was weakened by so large an infusion of inferior soldiery. But Pelopidas, after the splendid display of their valor under his own Antigua, never separated or scattered them, but would stand and run a battle, using them as one body. For as horses driven in a chariot go faster than those going loose, not because they more easily cleave the air when galloping in a solid body, but because their rivalry and racing with one another kills their spirit. So we imagine that brave men, inciting each other to an emulation in adventure, would prove most useful and forward when acting in one body. XX. When the Lacedaemonians made peace with all the other Greeks that attacked the Thebans and Cleomenes, their king, invaded Metea with 10,000 hoplites and 1,000 cavalry, within there was not that they should be reduced to their former condition, but absolute destruction plainly threatened their city, and such terror prevailed as never before had been in Metea. Pelopidas, when leaving his house, as his wife left a party with him and begged him to be careful of his life, answered, my dear, this is very good advice for private soldiers, but we warriors must think about saving the lives of others. When he reached the camp, he found that parts differing in opinion, and he at once gave his voice for the plan of Epaminondas, who voted for battle. He was not gamely tarnished, but in 19, he was in command of the Sacred Band, and enjoyed great confidence, as was only just a man should who had given such proof of patriotism. When, then, they had determined to face the enemy, and taken up a position at the opposite to the Spartan army, Pelopidas saw a vision in his sleep which greatly disturbed him. There are the tombs of the daughters of Stesius, whom they called Leuctra because of the place of their burial. For there it was that they were buried after they had been violated by some Spartan strangers. When this base and impious deed was done, their father, as he could get no satisfaction from the Lacedaemonians, invoked curses upon the Spartan race, and slew himself at the tombs of his daughters. Oracles and legends always had warned the Spartans to beware of the vengeance of Leuctra, though most of them did not understand it, and were not clear as to the place, since the small seaside town in Laconia is also called Leutrin, and there was a place of the same name near Megalopolis in Arcadia, and, also, this crime was committed a long time before the battle. XXI. So now Pelopidas, when asleep in the camp, seemed to see the maidens weeping over their tombs and invoking curses on the Spartans, and Scaticus, who bade him sacrifice a red virgin to the maidens, if he wished to conquer his enemies. And as this command seemed to him shocking and impious, he started up and consulted the prophets and the generals. Some of them forbade him to neglect or disobey the warning, quoting the famous old instances of Menelaus the son of Crete and Macaria the daughter of Heracles, and, in later times, Theocritus the philosopher, who was killed by the Lacedaemonians, and whose skin, according to some oracle, is still kept by their kings, and Leonidas, who following the oracle would in some sort offer himself as a victim on behalf of Greece. And furthermore they spoke of those persons whom Themistocles sacrificed to Dionysus before the sea fight at Salamis. All these are verified by the success which followed them. And again, Aeolus, when starting from the same place that Agamemnon did to fight the same enemies, was asked by the god, during a vision at Alvis, to give him his BG-20 daughter as a sacrifice. But he did not give her, but by his soft-heartedness ruined the expedition, which ingloriously failed. Others spoke on the other side, urging that so barbarous and envious a sacrifice could not be pleasing to any of the powers above, for, they said, it is not the titans and giants of legend that rule in heaven, but the father of all gods in heaven. To believe that there are deities that delight in the blood and slaughter of mankind is probably a foolish fancy. But if there be such, it is our duty to disregard them and treat them as powerless, for these strange and shocking desires can only take their origin and exist in feeble and depraved minds. XXII. While the chiefs of the army were engaged in this discussion, and Pelopidas especially was at a loss what to do, Ophelia escaped from some horses at Castor, and running through the ranks stopped opposite them. They admired her through shining with the brightest red, and the metal courage of her name, but Theocritus the prophet, comprehending what was meant, called to Pelopidas, happy man. Here is your victim. Let us not expect any other virgin, but take the gift the gods provide you. Hereupon the prophet led it to the tombs of the maidens. Here, after prayer, they hung garlands on the tombs, and made the sacrifice with joy, explaining to the whole army the vision of Pelopidas and their reasons for the sacrifice. XXII. In the battle, Epaminondas blocked his main body slantingly towards the left, in order that the Spartan right might be drawn as far as possible away from the other Greeks, and that by falling violently on Cleombrotus with his whole force on the womb, he might overpower and crush him. The enemy, perceiving what was being done, began to alter their own formation, expanding their right, with the intention of outflanking and enveloping Epaminondas. At this moment Pelopidas charged with the 300 in serried ranks. He caught the Lacedaemonians in a moment of confusion, when they were not standing ready to make an attack, for Cleombrotus had not time either to extend his right, or to bring the troops back again and close up the ranks. After PG-21, Spartans, skilled as they were to the highest pitch in war, had been specially educated and practiced in changing their formation without disorder or confusion. Each man used any other as his right hand or rear rank man, and wherever danger threatened they would lead it, forming and fighting simultaneously. But now, moving in 7 phalanx under Epaminondas, projecting before all the rest of the line, bore down upon them, and when Pelopidas, at a charge of inconceivable speed and daring was already amongst their ranks, their spirit and discipline was so shaken that the rout and slaughter of the Spartans was such as had never been before. In this victory and success as much glory belonged to Pelopidas, though not one of the generals, and only in command of a few men, as to Epaminondas, who was betarch and leader of the whole horse. XXIV. In the invasion of Peloponnesus they were both etarchs, and they brought over to their side most of the nations there, for they detached from the Lacedaemonian alliance Alus, Argos, the whole of Arcadia, and most part of Laconia itself. It was midwinter, a few days only remained of the last month, and with the new year the law was that the commands should be delivered of the new generals chosen. Death was the penalty in case of disobedience, and all the other etarchs, fearing this law and wishing to avoid the severe weather, wished to withdraw the army homewards, but Pelopidas first, supported by Epaminondas, encouraged his fellow citizens, and crossed the Eurus. He took to his house and reached all their country up to the seacoast.
He's coming after me. Why are you picking on me? Come on.
The great reputation which these men enjoy made the rest follow them without any formal vote or decree to do so. For the first and most fundamental law is that which makes men...
You're trying to gang up on me.
And even if, like men sailing on a calm sea or anchored close to port, they sometimes murmur and brave their pilot, yet in time of danger and storm they look up to him and place all their hopes in him. So the Argives...
Bullies, that's what you are, bullies.
G22 claims the supremacy, but in more than a critical moments they of their own accord obeyed the Phaeacian generals. In this campaign, Arcadia was consolidated into one state. They also separated Messenia, which had been annexed by the Spartans, and bringing back the Messenian exiles established them in the old capital, Icon. On their homeward march through Kentra they gained a victory over the Athenians, who attempted to harass them and hinder their march through the narrow isthmus of Corinth. XXV. After these exploits all men were full of admiration and wonder at their courage and success, but the feelings of their countrymen and political opponents, which grew along with the growth of their renown, prepared a most scurvy reception for them. On their return they were both tried for their lives, on the ground that whereas the law is that during the first month of the year, which they call rotation, the etarchs must lay down their office, they have held it for 4 additional months, during which they have been settling the affairs of Messenia, Laconia, and Arcadia. Pelopidas was tried first, and so incurred the greater danger, but both were acquitted. Epaminondas, who thought that true courage and magnanimity was best shown by forbearance in political strife, bore this contemptible attack with patience, but Pelopidas, who was of a hotter temper, and whose friends encouraged him to
coming after me. It's an onslaught.
Meneclides the orator had been one of the conspirators who came with Pelopidas in Melankicari's house. as, after the revolution, he did not obtain equal rights with the rest, being a man of great ability in speaking, but reckless and of condition, he took using his powers to slander and assail the men in power, and was not silenced even by the result of that trial. Epaminondas turned out of his office of Betarch, and for a long time succeeded in lessening his influence in the state. But Pelopidas he could not misrepresent to the people, so he endeavored to make a quarrel between them and her. He used the usual method of detractors, who they themselves be inferior to the object of their spite. PG-23, tried at any rate to prove that he is inferior to someone else. And having the ear of the people, he was ever singing the praises of Charon, and uttering panegyrics on his skill and his success.
That's what he was doing.
He endeavored to set up a memorial of the cavalry battle at Trapp, before the
He tried to do that.
in which the Thebans under Charon were victorious, in the following manner. Andromaches of Cyzicus had been entrusted by the state with the task of hanging a picture of some other battle, and had been engaged on it at Thebes.
Don't get bums, they took away our 2 cents. Oh well, that's all we saw this time.
And Menaechmus persuaded him to put it up publicly and to write on it the name of Charon, in order to throw the glory of Pelopidas and Epaminondas into the shade.
We knew it, forgot
A silly
something.
exhibition of ill feeling indeed, to compare one poor skirmish, in which Tyrannas, an obscure Spartan, and some 40 men fell, for the great and important services of the others. Pelopidas indicted this proposal as illegal, arguing that it was not the custom of the Thebans to show honor to individuals, but to keep alive the name of a victory for the glory of the country at large. He bestowed unmeasured praise upon Charon throughout the trial, and proved Menaechmus to be a malignant slanderer. He was fined a large sum, and not being able to pay it, subsequently endeavored to bring about a revolution in the state, by which one gained some insight into his character. XXVI. Alexander, the tyrant of Thor, was at this time at open war with many states of Thessaly, and threatened the independence of all. Ambassadors from the states were sent to Thebes, begging for a military force and the general to be dispatched to their assistance. Pelopidas, since Epaminondas was busy settling the affairs of Peloponnesus, offered himself to the Thessalians, as he could not bear that his talents and skill should lie idle, and he thought that where Epaminondas was, no second general could be needed. So he marched with a sufficient army into Thessaly, took Larissa, and, when Alexander begged for terms of peace, endeavored to convert him into a mild and law-abiding ruler. But he, a wild, desperate, cruel barbarian, when he was accused of insolent PG-24 and grasping practices, and Pelopidas used harsh and angry language, went off in a rage, with his bodyguard. Pelopidas, having relieved the Thessalians from fear of his tyrant, and reconciled them one to another, proceeded to Macedonia. Here Ptolemy was at war with Alexander, king of Macedonia. Each of them had sent for him to act as arbitrator and judge between them, thinking that he would
Damn it,
whichever
there's
should prove
nothing
to have been wrong.
I can't see through
He
it.
came and settled their dispute, and after bringing back the exiled party, took Philip, the king's brother,
Let her run.
and 30 other sons of the noblest families as hostages, and kept them at Thebes to show the Greeks how far the Theban policy
Yeah,
extended,
thank you.
merely through its reputation for power and for justice. This was that Philip
Ah!
afterwards endeavored to enslave Greece. At that time he was put away, and lived in the house of Panlus.
don't kill
On this account, he was thought to be an imitator of Epaminondas, and perhaps he did take part the great man's energy in the war, which was one of his virtues, but is to the spirit of self-restraint, justice, magnanimity, and mildness, which formed the true greatness of his character. Of this Philip neither by nature or education had the least idea. XXVII. After these events, the Thessalians again complained of Alexander of for attacking their cities, and Pelopidas and Ascanius were sent as ambassadors to them.
Come on,
Pelopidas,
bonkers.
however, brought no army with him, as no war was expected, and was forced to make use of the native Thessalians in this emergency. As affairs in Macedonia had again fallen into disorder, for Ptolemy had assassinated the king, and was in possession of the sovereignty, while the friends of the deceased invited Pelopidas to interfere, he wished to do something. And having no troops of his own, he hired some local mercenaries and marched off at once against Ptolemy. When they drew near to each other, Ptolemy by bribes induced the mercenaries to desert to himself, but, fearing the name and prestige of Pelopidas, he went out to Enesco, who were the more powerful of the two, and after giving him and thanking him to be his friend, he agreed to hold the kingdom in trust for the brothers of the PG-25, deceased king, and to form a defensive and offensive alliance with Thebes. For the fulfillment of these conditions, he gave as hostages his own son Felix and 50 of his companions, whom Pelopidas sent to Thebes, but as he was angry at the desertion of his mercenaries, and learned that their property, wives and children were for the most part placed in Pharsalus, so that by capturing a place he could make them pay the penalty of their crime, he got together a force of Thessalians and came to Pharsalus. When he was just arrived, Alexander the tyrant took him with his army. Pelopidas and his friends supposed that he had come to establish his innocence, and went to meet him, knowing him to be profligate and bloodthirsty, yet fearing no harm, because of the name of Thebes and their own personal prestige. But he, when he saw them approaching him unarmed and alone,
Ouch.
at once secured them and took Pharsalus, striking fear and terror into all his subjects. For they expected that after an act of such daring lawlessness he would spare no one, but treat them as one who had made up his mind to lose his own life. XXVII. The Thebans, when they heard this, were greatly moved, and at once dispatched an army to the rescue, but on account of some quarrel with Epaminondas they appointed others to the command. The tyrant to Pelopidas never in the first allowed any who chose to converse with him, supposing that he would be cast down and humbled by his misfortunes. But when the people of Thor came to lament over him, Pelopidas bade them be of good courage, as now if ever the tyrant would have to pay the penalty of his crimes, and he sent a message to the tyrant himself, saying that he was a strange man, to torture and murder his wretched and innocent citizens every day, and to spare him, who knew he was sure to meet the
I'm gonna
vengeance
die!
of the
Help! Somebody save me!
in spirit and fearlessness, said, What?
I'm doomed.
Pelopidas wished to die? The other, hearing of this answer, yes, wishing him to become even more equal to him than you are now, and so made him sooner. Thereupon he prevented the people from having access to him, but TH, the daughter of Jason, and Alexander's PG-26, wife, having heard how he
Please don't kill me.
daring and nobleness, desired to see the man and converse with him. When she was come, she did not, woman-like, at once perceived the greatness of his mind in the position in which he was. But
I don't want Bronto going up there.
That he was treated ill and not as became such a man, she wept. Claudius, not knowing at first who she was surprised at this, but when he knew her, addressed her by her father's name.
Hi, you guys, get away!
When she said, I pity your wife, so do I pity you.
How come there's so many over here?
Go!
Go!
This
Get lost.
The lady, for she was grieved at the ferocity and licentiousness of the tyrant. Besides his other atrocities, had to help her youngest brother. She heard
Pronto!
And, talking to him of her sufferings, became filled with courage and with hatred of Alexander. XXIX. The Theban generals invaded Thessaly, but through incompetence or misfortune effected nothing, and had to retreat in disgrace. The state fined them 10,000 drachmas, but sent Epaminondas with the army. There was at once a great fluttering of hope among the cities of Thessaly at the reputation of that general, and the cause of the tyrant towered to its fall. Such fear fell upon his officers and friends, and such a longing to subvert his government upon his subjects, who viewed the future with hope, as now they expected to see the tyrant beat with his deserts. However, Epaminondas, disregarding his own glory and the safety of his populace, and fearing that if Alexander would finish his by seeing his kingdom falling to pieces, he might turn upon him like a wild beast, conducted the war in this way.
Something's going on.
By degrees, after slow preparation, he surrounded the tyrant and confined him to one spot, so as to be able to check any attack that he might venture on, and yet not to excite his savage and ferocious nature. For he had heard of his cruelty and disregard of his life, and how he would bury men alive, and dress them in the skins of wild boars and bears, and then send dogs at them and hurt them with spears, making this his sport. And PG-27, how he surrounded two peaceful cities, Coleve and Scotusa, with his bodyguard, when the inhabitants were at their public assemblies, he would slew them all from the youth upwards, and how he had consecrated and crowned the spear with which he killed his uncle Polyphron, and used to address prayers. So it became a snare. Once when he saw Virginia performing Euripion's tragedy, the Troads, he was suddenly out of the theater, and sent a message to him to be of good courage, and not act worse for this, for he had not left the house because he disliked his acting, but because he felt ashamed that the citizens should see him weeping at the rows of Hecuba and Andromache, though he never had pitied any of the people whom he had put to death himself. But he, terrified by the prestige and reputation of Epaminondas, was strategy, let all his feathers like a craven cock.
It's the second time I've seen Brontosaurus over there.
He
likes that spot.
But agreed to armistice for 30 days, and taking Pelopidas and assuming he returned home. XXX. When the Thebans heard that ambassadors were being sent from Athens and Sparta to the great king to make an alliance with him, they also sent Pelopidas, a step most advantageous to his reputation. As he went on his journey through the Persian provinces, he excited the greatest admiration, for the fame of his victories over the late opponents has spread through the tongue of Asia, and from the time of his first success at Udra it had begun to reach far and wide. Some new exploit being ever added to it, some had reached to the furthest peoples. Next, when he reached the court, he was directed to wonder ages with satraps, generals, and officers there. This is the man, he said, who destroyed the least only women in overseas land, and who reduced to the little state at the foot which was fighting Eurotas, the Spartan which a little while before went to war under ancient laws with the great king himself about Susa and Ecbatana. At this part Xerxes himself was BG-28, pleased, and admired Pelopidas and showed him great honor, as he wished it to appear that he was courted and sought after by the most powerful Greeks. After an interview, in which he found that he spoke with sounder sense than the Athenians, and greater simplicity than the Spartans, he esteemed him still more, and after the fashion of monarchs, did not conceal his regard, but let the other ambassadors see plainly that he was highest in favor. Of all the Greeks he showed Amyclatus the greatest honor, when he took off his own wreath of flowers at table and dipping it in scent, gave it him to put on. He attempted no such refinements with Pelopidas, but gave him presents, more splendid and valuable than was customary, and assent to his proposals that all Greek states should be independent, that Messenia should be reconstituted, and that the Thebans should be accounted the king's old friends. With these answers, and none of the presents except such as were pledges of friendship and goodwill, he returned, to the great discredit of the other ambassadors. The Athenians condemned and executed Timagoras, and it was with the amount of presents which he received, rightly enough. For he not only took silver and gold, but a costly bed and slaves to make it, as if Greeks did not know how, and also 80 cows and their herds, on the pretense of 1 cow's milk for some weakness that he suffered from. And at last he went down to the seacoast carried in a palanquin, and 4 talents were given by the king to his bearers killed. It does not seem to have been his penalty which especially disgusted the Athenians. At any rate, Epictetus, called the bearded, once brought a motion before the assembly that instead of electing 9 archons yearly they should send 9 poor citizens as ambassadors to the great king, that they might be enriched by him, at which there was great laughter. But it was because of the success of the Thebans that they were so vexed, not reflecting on the power of Pelopidas' name, and how far it outweighed all their rhetoric in the estimation of one who always inclined to the stronger side. XXXI. On his return, Pelopidas was welcomed with PG-29, no little gratitude because he had re-established Messenia, and obtained freedom for all the Greeks.
No.
But Alexander of had relapsed into his old courses, and had ravaged the territory of many cities of Thessaly. The Theoparchenes and Magnetes formed a league to oppose him, and hearing of Pelopidas' return, these cities sent a Thebes begging for a force to help them, and for an Essex general. The Thebans willingly decreed this, but when all was ready and the general was about to march, the sun was eclipsed and darkness fell upon the city. Pelopidas, seeing that all men were disheartened at this, found that it was useless to force fighting men full of prestige of people to march with him, nor did he like to risk the lives of 6,000 citizens, but he offered his own services to the Thessalians, and took with him 300 horsemen, volunteers and men of other states. With this force he started, though forbidden by the prophets and against the will of his fellow citizens, all held that a great fortune had been shown to him about some celebrated man. However, he was all the fiercer against Alexander, remembering his own sufferings, and hoping from his conversations with Th that by this time his own family would have turned against him. He was also much encouraged by the glory of the action. At a time when the Laconians were sending out generals and governors to help Dionysius the Sicilian tyrant, and when the Athenians had Alexander in their pay, and had even set up a bronze statue of him as a public benefactor, he might show the Greeks that it was the Thebans alone who took up arms in defense of the oppressed, and to put an end to the violent and illegal rule of despots in Greece. XXXII. When he had come to Pharsalus and collected his army there, he marched straight to attack Alexander. But he, seeing that Pelopidas' force of Thebans was small, while he had more than double his numbers of Thessalian hoplites, met him near the shrine of Thetis. When someone said to Pelopidas that the tyrant was coming on with a great force, he answered, "So much the better, for we shall conquer more." Between the two armies, near a place called G30, below the dogs' heads, were some high and isolated hills. Each party tried to occupy these with their infantry, but Pelopidas, knowing his cavalry to be numerous and good, set him to charge that of the enemy. The enemy's force was moved and pursued over the plain, but meanwhile Alexander had secured the hills, and when the Thessalian infantry came afterwards, and tried to force their way up the hill into its strong position, he was able to cut down the foremost, while the rest suffered from his missiles and could do nothing. Pelopidas now recalled the cavalry, and sent these to attack the enemy's position in flank, while he himself took his shield and ran to join the infantry in their fight on the hill. Pushing his way through their ranks till he reached the front, he infused such strength and ardor into them, that the enemy thought that they attacked with new bodies as well as new spirit. They repulsed one or two assaults, but seeing that the infantry resolutely came on, and also that the cavalry had returned from its pursuit and was threatening their flank, they made an orderly retreat. Pelopidas, when he gained the height, saw below the whole of the enemy not yet beaten, but confused and shaken. He stood still and looked around him, seeking Alexander himself. When he saw him, on the right, rallying and encouraging his mercenaries, he could no longer restrain his rage, but keenly at the sight, and, reckless of his own person and of his duties as a general, rushed far beyond the rest, shouting and challenging the tyrant to fight. He would not await the attack, but took refuge from the ranks of his bodyguard. Pelopidas attacked these troops and cut them down, wounding several mortally, but they from a distance struck him through his armor with their spears, while the Thessalians in great anxiety charged down the hill to the rescue. But he had by this time fallen. The cavalry now charged through the whole body, and pursuing them to a great distance, strewed the country with corpses, while they cut down more than 3,000 of them.
Please don't kill me. Please go somewhere else. Fight somewhere else.
That the fellows who were Greek at the death of Pelopidas, and called him their father, their savior, their teacher, and all that was G31.
Please don't kill me.
The Thessalians and their allies, they agreed upon the brave man, proved their gratitude to him, even more by their sorrow. It is said that the men who were inside their armor, nor unbridled their horses, nor even bind up their wounds.
I see over there.
Of his death, but one as they were from victory in their arms, walked round his horse, piling up near it, as a trophy, the arms of their slain enemies. They cut off the knees of their horses and their own hair, and their arms were fenced, with no fire, and with no supper, but there was such silence in this honesty.
Enjoy, buddy. Was that still you over there?
Great and glorious victory over him. As soon as the sad news reached the cities of Thessaly, the chief men, youths, children, and priests came forth in procession to receive his body, and carry trophies and wreaths and golden armor in his honor.
Is Bronchunk dead?
He was about to be
No, there he is.
The chiefs of the Thessalians begged the Thebans to allow them to bury him, and one of them spoke as follows: "Allies, we beg of you a favor which will prove to be an honor and a comfort to us in this our great misfortune. We Thessalians shall never again escort Pelopidas, nor render him the honors which he deserved. But if we may have his body to touch, and ourselves adorn it and bury it, we shall then be able to show you that we Thessalians truly feel this misfortune more than even you Thebans. For you have only lost a good general, while we have lost that, and our liberty too, since how can we ever have the heart to ask you for another general, after not giving you Pelopidas back?" This proposal the Thebans agreed to. XXXIV. No funeral was more smart than this, not indeed in the estimation of those who think us immortalized in ivory and gold and purple. Aesculapius celebrates and praises the funeral of Dionysius, for his journey concluded like the Caucasus surrounded of some great tragedy. Alexander the Great, when he had died, not only cut off the knees of the horses and mules, but at G32, Ally took down the battlements from the walls, the cities might sing in mourning, presenting a short and woeful look in contrast to their former appearance. But these were the commands of Titus. They were done under compulsion, and caused the feeling of dislike of the person honored, and of absolute hatred against those who enforced them, but showed no gratitude or desire to honor
Please don't kill me.
They were mere displays of barbaric pride and boastful extravagance, which wasted superfluity on vain and useless objects. Whereas, here was a private citizen who died in a foreign land, without his wife, his children, his friends, and, without anyone asking for it or compelling him to it, he was escorted to his grave, buried and crowned with garlands by so many provinces and cities, vying with one another and showing him honor, that he seems to have enjoyed the most blessed fate possible. Brezhnev says, the death of a fortune is not useless, but Christ says it secures their felicity, and puts it out of fortune's power. The Spartan Scopel, who, when Diogos, the Olympic victor, was looking at his sons being in return crowned as victors at Olympia, with his grandchildren about him, embraced him and said, "Die, Diogos. For you cannot rise Olympus and you will not enter." Yet I do not suppose that anyone would compare all the Olympian to
Bob,
the
222. Oh God.
Was part of his life esteemed and looked up to, and at last,
Fascist as well.
Fighting gloriously against the tyrant, he died in the defense of the liberties of Thessaly. XXXV. His death caused great sorrow to his allies, but likewise benefited them. For the Thebans, as soon as they heard of the death of Pelopidas, did not delay for a moment to avenge his fall, but hastily marched with an army of 7,000 hoplites and 700 cavalry under Malchus and Diogenes against Alexander. Finding that he was weak and short of much of his power, they compelled him to restore to the Thessalians their cities, which he held, to liberate the Archens in Magnesia and Thetis, to withdraw his garrisons from PG-33, those countries, and to swear to the Thebans that he would attack, and assist them to attack, any enemy they might choose. The Thebans were satisfied with these terms. But I will now recount how, shortly afterwards, heaven exacted retribution from him for the death of Glaucus. TH's wife, as we have said before, had been taught by Glaucus not to fear the outward pomp and bodyguard of the tyrant, since she was right in all his offenses. She, dreading his suspicious nature, and hating his cruelty, made a plot with her 3 brothers, Tisiphonus, Hyphalos, and Lycophron, which she carried out in the following manner. The night patrol of the guard watched in the house, but their bedchamber was upstairs, and before the door there was a dog chained as a guard, very savage with everyone except themselves and one of their servants who fed it. Now when TH determined to make the attempt, she got her brothers concealed near him during the day in one of the rooms, and when she came, as usual, alone to Alexander's chamber, she found him asleep. In a little time she came out again, and ordered the servants to take away the dog, as a desperate wished to sleep undisturbed. Fearing that the stairs would make a noise when the young men mounted, she covered them with wool, and then brought up her brothers, with their swords drawn. Leaving them outside, she herself went in, and taking down the sword that hung over his head, showed it to them as a proof that he was in their power and asleep. The young men now were terrified, and hesitated to act. But she reproached them bitterly, and swore that she would herself awaken Alexander and tell him the whole plot. Between shame and terror she got them in and placed them round the bed, herself holding the light. One of them seized his feet, another held his head back by the hair, and the third dispatched him with a stab of his sword, a death, perhaps, easier than he deserved. He was the first, or perhaps the only despot ever assassinated by his own wife. His body after death was dragged about and trodden underfoot by the people for a recompense which his villainies deserved. Footnotes. 1. Callicrates, the Lacedaemonian admiral, was defeated and slain by the Athenians at the Battle of Argynnis BC 406. 2. No one seems able to identify this battle. See Gross History, Part 2, CHLXXVII, Note, SV. Epaminondas. 3. See Life of Titus Flaminianus, pages 175, Note. 4. More usually spelled in shades. 5. Admire, the Acropolis of Thebes, a fortress on a lofty rock overhanging the town. 6. In Edda. 7. The chief priests who presided at the Eleusinian Mysteries. 8. The office of Etarch is described in Langton Smith's Dictionary of Antiquities. They seem probably to have been military leaders of the Confederacy of the whole of the cities of Media. 9. This was the case in all Greek towns. Namely, there were 2 parties, aristocratic and democratic. The democracy being now in the ascendant in Thebes, the party which favored the Spartans, the most aristocratic state in Greece, had gone into exile. 10. For the number of men in Amora, see pages 16. 11. See both. I. Life of Lycurgus, ch. 9. PG-34 Life of Marcellus. Titus Agonius tells us that Marcus Claudius, who was 5 times consul of the Roman people, was the son of Marcus, and was the first of his family to receive the name of Marcellus, which means warlike. Indeed, by his experience he became a thorough soldier. His body was strong, and his arm powerful. He was fond of war, and bore himself with a lordly arrogance in battle, though otherwise he was of a quiet and amiable disposition, fond of Greek culture and literature, to the extent of respecting and admiring those who knew it, though he from his want of leisure could not make such progress as he wished. For the Roman chiefs of that period were, if any they never were, condemned, in the words of Homer. From youth age, disastrous wars to wage. 12. In their youth they fought the Carthaginians on the Sicilian coast. In middle age they fought the Gauls in defense of Italy itself. When advanced in years they again contended with Hannibal and the Carthaginians, not, as common men do, obtaining any relief from constant service because of their old age, but ever urged by their courage and nobility of soul to accept and command in new campaigns. Aye. Marcellus was practiced in all forms of battle, but was especially skillful in single combat, so that he never declined any man's challenge, and slew all who challenged him. In Sicily he saved the life of his brother Odysseus when in great peril, by holding the shield over him and killing his assailants. For this conduct, young as he was, PG-35, he received crowns of 13, and rewards from the generals, and as he grew in reputation was elected general by the people, and honored by the priests. This is a kind of priestly office, which the law especially assigns the observance of auguries drawn from the flight of birds. During his tenure of the office of Isle, he was obliged, much against his will, to commence a lawsuit. He had a son of his own name, in the bloom of youth, of great beauty, and equally with it admired by his countrymen for his modesty and education. Copies Holiness, Marcellus's colleague, a licentious and reckless man, made disgraceful proposals to this lad. He first repelled his attacks alone, but on a second attempt told his father, and Marcellus, being much enraged, summoned a man before his head. He attempted many quibbles and subterfuges, and appealed to the tributes of the people to support him, but as they refused his application he took himself to plead in denial of the charge. There being no witnesses of what he said, the Senate decided to send for the war, and when they saw how he must have wept with the modesty mingled with unquenchable rage, they, without requiring any other proof, found Holiness guilty, and condemned him to pay a fine, with which Marcellus had silver libation vessels made, and consecrated them to the gods. Aye. After 22 years the first Punic War came to an end, and the Romans turned their attention to Gaulish troubles. The Insubrians, a Celtic tribe dwelling in Italy at the foot of the Alps, powerful by themselves, were collecting other forces, and enrolling all those Gauls in Fort Hire, called Chian. It was a wonderful and fortunate circumstance that the Celtic War did not break out at the same time as that with Carthage, but that the Gauls, like the gladiator who waits to fight with the survivor of a pair of combatants, had remained quiet during the whole of that war, and now stepped forward and challenged the victors when they were at leisure. Yet the war caused much terror, because it would take place on their own frontier against their PG-36 neighbor states, and because of the ancient reputation of the Gauls, whom the Romans seemed to fear more than any other nation. They once lost their city at their hands, and afterwards passed a law that the priests should be exempt from all military service, except in case of another war with Gaul. Their alarm was shown both by their preparations, for it is said that never before or since were there so many thousand Romans under arms, and by their extraordinary sacrifices. For though they never observed the barbarous ceremonies of foreigners, but as far as possible are humane and like the Greeks in their origin, on the outbreak of this war they were compelled to follow certain prophecies in the civilian posts, and bury alive 2 Greeks, a man and a woman, and likewise 2 Gauls, in the place called the Cattle Market. In accordance with these prophecies they still up to this day in the month of November perform religious mysteries, which may not be seen or spoken of by either Greeks or Gauls. IV. At the beginning of the war the Romans were sometimes victorious and sometimes defeated, without coming to any decisive action, until the consul of Flaminius Imperius, who led a great army against the Insubrians. Then the river that passes through Picenum ran blood, and it was said that 3 moons were seen at the city of Perineum, and the others, who watched the omens of the consular elections, declared that the appointment of these consuls was wrong and a evil omen for the people. Thereupon the Senate immediately sent dispatches to the camp recalling the consuls, that they might as soon as possible return and lay down their office and so undertake nothing as consuls against the enemy. Flaminius, when he received these dispatches, did not open them before him that the barbarians in Ireland overrun their country. So when he returned to Rome loaded with spoil, the people did not go out to meet him, but, because he had not at once obeyed his orders, and had treated them with insolent contempt, very nearly refused him his triumph, and after the triumph reduced him to a private station, forcing both him and his colleague to give up their office. So much regard had the Romans for religion, that they PG-37 would not on occasions of the greatest good fortune overlook any neglect of the prophecies and customs of their ancestors, holding it more important for the safety of the state that their generals should reverence the gods than that they should conquer the enemy. D. As an example of this, Tiberius Sempronius, a man second to no one in Rome for courage and virtue, named as his successors when consuls Scipio Nasica and Caius Marcius, and when they were actually in possession of their provinces and armies he happened to consult with the sacred ritual, and found in it an old custom which he did not know before. It was to this effect. When a consul has found a house or tent outside the city to watch the flight of birds, and he wanted before any certain omen appears, to return to the city for what cause soever, he must give up the place which he hired and take another, and make his observation over again from the beginning. This, it seems, Tiberius did not know, and it was after using the same place twice that he named these men consuls. Afterwards, having discovered his error, he laid the matter before the Senate. And that body did not despise this apparently slight irregularity, but sent dispatches to the men who had once left their provinces, returned to Rome, and resigned their office. Now this happened in later times. But in the very times of which we write, 2 men of the best family were deprived of the priesthood, Cornelius Saphius, because he handled the entrails improperly at a sacrifice, and Quintus Sulpicius, because when he was sacrificing, the crested hat which he wore as Flamen fell off his head. And because, when Minucius the dictator was appointing Caius Flaminius his master of the knights, the mouse which is called the coffin mouse was heard to squeak, they turned them out of their office, and elected others. But, though so elaborately careful in trifles, they never admitted any superstitious observance, and neither altered nor added anything to their ancestral ritual. VI. When Flaminius and his colleague had resigned their offices, Marcellus was designated consul by these heritage. 14. On entering upon his office he nominated CNS Cornelius as his colleague. It was said that the PG-38
Let's see if I can do a little bit better. I tried to do better.
But that Marcellus raised the spirit of the people and excited them to continue the war. But still a peace was concluded. And it seems to have been the Diet who renewed the war, by causing the Alans stirring up the Insubrians. 30,000 in number, they joined that tribe, which was many times larger, and in high spirits at once attacked Asara city beyond the river Po. From that place Grimomarus with 10,000 had proceeded to plunder the country near the Po. Marcellus hearing this left his colleague Coracera with the infantry, heavy baggage, and 1/3 of the cavalry, and himself, with the rest of the cavalry and about 600 of the most active foot soldiers, marched night and day till he fell in with the 10,000 at Clastidium, a Gaulish village which not long before had been subject to the Romans. There was no time for rest or refreshment. For his arrival was at once perceived by the enemy, and his voice disguised, as had so little infantry with him, but the self saw nothing of his cavalry. Admirable horsemen proud of their superior skill, they also had greatly the advantage of Marcellus in numbers, and at once, their 2 riding foremost, charged the Romans with great impetuosity and terrible threats, expecting to sweep them away. Marcellus, fearing that they might surround and outflank his small body, spread out his cavalry, thinning and widening his line, until he presented a party nearly equal to that of the enemy. He was now advancing to the charge, when his horse, scared at the terrible display of the enemy, turned short round, and forcibly carried him back. Marcellus, fearing that this might cause superstitious terror to the Romans, hastily wheeled his horse round on the bridle hand, and having again directed him against the enemy, paid his adorations to the sun, as though he had made the circle not by chance, but of set purpose. For the Romans have this custom, of turning round to worship their gods, and so he, as he was on the point of joining battle, found that he would consecrate the finest of the enemy's arms to be there to Demetrius. At this moment the group of the Gauls, seeing him, PG-39, and conjecturing from his dress that he was the Roman leader, rode out far beyond the rest, and made directly for him, defiantly shouting a challenge, and brandishing his spear. He was a man distinguished from the rest of the Gauls by his tall stature and his complete armor, which glittered like with gold and silver and all kinds of gay devices with which he was encrusted. Marcellus, as he looked along the enemy's line, thought that these were the finest arms, who were those about which he had made his vow to deliver for Atreus. He rushed upon the Gaul, pierced his breastplate with a spear, and by the end of his horse bore him to the ground alive, and with the second he leaping from his horse and seizing the armor of the dead man, he said, looking up to heaven, Jupiter Feretrius, thou that seest the great deeds of generals and captains in war, I call thee to witness that I am the third Roman general that has slain the enemy's general and king, by killing this man here with my own hand, and having killed him I consecrate to thee the first and fairest of the spoils. But do thou grant us like good fortune in the rest of this war. Thereupon the Roman cavalry charged, not against cavalry by itself, but they fought against infantry and cavalry mixed together, and won a victory of an unparalleled and wonderful kind. For never before or since that day did such a body of horsemen run such numbers of horse and foot. Having slain the greater part of them, and collected their arms and stores, he returned to his colleague, who with difficulty holding his own against the Celts before the walls of the largest and most populous of Gaulish cities. It is called Mandulium, and is regarded by the Cisalpine walls as their metropolis. Consequently, they fought vigorously in its defense, and more besieged Cornelius.
Thank you, Riptide. That was a great save.
The Gia, as soon as they heard of the defeat and death of their king, moved home. Mandulium fell, and the Celts of their own accord surrendered the other cities, and threw themselves upon the
Killed my buddy.
They will see a modern terms of peace. PG-40.
Sasquatch.
I'm
gonna die. Help.
His procession was glorious, as few others have been, with a splendor and value.
Come on, go ahead and steal it.
Stature of the captives.
Go ahead.
But the strangest and most interesting sight of all was the general himself, as he appeared carrying the suit of armor of the Gaul to offer it
It's
to
all
the god.
yours.
He had cut and trimmed the trunk of a tall young oak tree, and had tied and hung the spoils upon it, each put in its proper place. When the procession began, he himself mounted his chariot and four, and carried in state through the city. This the most glorious of all his trophies of victory. The army marched
gotcha,
after him
girl.
with their finest armor, singing as they went songs and paeans of victory in honor of the gods and their leader. Thus he proceeded till he reached the temple of Feretrius. Here he dismounted and dedicated his spoils, being the third, and, up to a day, the last who ever did so. First comes Romulus, with the spoils of Acron of Siena. Second, Cornelius Cossus offered the spoils of Polonius the Etruscan. Third, Marcellus offered these spoils of Vinomarus, the king of the Gauls. After Marcellus, one man. The god whom they are offered is called Jupiter Feretrius, according to some, from the trophy being carried upon a pharetrum, or bier, as it is called in the Greek tongue, which then was much mixed with the Latin. But according to others, it is an echo of Jupiter the Thunderer, or the Romans call striking fir. Others say that the name comes from striking the enemy. For even now in battle when they are pursuing the enemy they keep shouting, "Gun," that is, strike, to one another. The word for ordinary spoils is spolia, but for these spolia opima. Yet it is said that Numa Pompeius speaks of first, second, and third degrees of spolia opima, ordering the first to be offered to Jupiter Feretrius, the second to Mars, and the third to Polonius. And that for the first the price is 300 cases, 200 for the second, and 100 for the third. This common story runs that those spoils alone are spolia opima which are taken at a pitched battle, and first of all, and by the general of PG-41, the one side from the general of the other. But of these things enough. The Roman people were so overjoyed at that victory in the end of the war that they made from the money paid to ransom captives a golden statue, and sent it to Apollo at Delphi as a thank offering, and gave a magnificent share of the booty to their allies, and even sent many presents to Hero the king of Syracuse, their friend and ally. Ix. When Hannibal invaded Italy, Marcellus was sent with an army to Sicily, but when the disaster came to place, where many thousand Romans perished, and only a few fugitives collected at Tunisium, it was expected that Hannibal would at once march to attack Rome, as he had cut off the greater part of the army. Marcellus at once sent a garrison of 1,500 men to guard the city, and afterwards, in obedience to Licinius consultant, went to Tunisium, and taking command of the fugitives collected there, led them out of their fortified camp, to show that he would not deliver up the country to the enemy. The Romans had lost many of their most capable leaders in the wars, and Fabius Maximus, who had the greatest reputation, was blamed by them for sloth and want of enterprise because of his excessive caution in avoiding a defeat. Thinking, therefore, that he was an excellent general for defense, not for attack, they cast their eyes upon Marcellus, and in order to combine his vigor and daring with the cautious and far-seeing tactics of the other, they at one time elected them both consuls, and another made the one consul with the other serving as proconsul. This Sidonius tells us that Fabius was called the shield of the state, and Marcellus the sword. And Hannibal himself said that he feared Fabius as a schoolmaster, but regarded Marcellus as an antagonist, for the former prevented his doing any mischief, while the latter might make him suffer some. X. At first Hannibal's soldiers, elated with the victory, roamed with careless confidence out of their camp and plundered the country, where Marcellus fell upon them, and by a series of defeats considerably weakened them. Next, he went to Naples and Nola. At Naples he PG-42 encouraged the citizens, who of their own accord wished well to the Roman cause. But at Nola he found the city in a state of faction, as the Senate were unable to restrain the populace, who favored Hannibal. There was one Dandius, a man of the first nobility of the city, renowned for bravery. This man had fought at him with his weakness for war, and had slain many Carthaginians. When after the battle he was found in a heap of slain with his body pierced with darts, Hannibal, in admiration of his courage, not only dismissed him without ransom, but gave him presents and made him a personal friend. Dandius, out of gratitude, was one of the most eager partisans of Hannibal, and, having great influence with the people, was urging them to revolt. Marcellus thought that it would be a crime to put to death a man of such glorious antecedents, and who had taken part in one of the greatest struggles of the Romans. And, besides his natural kindliness, being able by his conversation to win over any man of noble nature, he on one occasion when greeted by Dandius inquired who he might be, though he knew very well, but merely wanted a pretext and opportunity for conversation with him. For, when he answered, "Which is Dandius?" Marcellus, as though surprised and pleased, said, "Are you indeed the Dandius, of whom all those who fought at him told us at Rome, the only man who did not desert Paulus Gellius the consul, but who received upon his own body the greater part of the darts which were aimed at him?" Bandius admitted that he was the man, and indeed were to speak lightly of his wounds. But Marcellus went on, "Then, as you bear about you such marks of your devotion to our cause, why did you not at once come to me? Do you think us slow to requite the valor of our friends, when it is honored even by the enemy?" Having spoken to him thus courteously, he embraced him, and presented him with a horse and 500 silver drachmas. Sorry. After this, Bandius became the firmest partisan and ally of Marcellus, and a terrible denouncer and assailant of the opposite party. This was a numerous one, and their design was, when the Romans should march out of the town against the enemy, to attack their baggage. RPG 43, Cellus, therefore, having marshaled his troops within the city, brought the baggage to the gates, and by proclamation forbade the people of Noah to approach the walls. Thus no force was visible, and he induced Hannibal to march up to the city in disorderly array, as he supposed that within it all was confusion. Then Marcellus ordered the gate nearest him to be thrown open, and with the rest of his cavalry charged forward and fell upon the enemy hand to hand. Presently the infantry poured out another gate, and armed with loud shouts. And while Hannibal was dividing his forces to deal with the third gate open, from it issued the remainder of the army, and from all sides attacking Carthaginians, who were bewildered at the undecisiveness of the attack, and were without spirit against their immediate assailants, because of these others who they saw would soon beset them. At first did Hannibal's troops give way before the Romans, and would chase the great loss into their camp. It is said that more than 5,000 perished, and that no more than 500 Romans fell. But Livy does not consider that a great defeat took place, or that so many of the enemy fell, but he points out that Marcellus gained much glory by that battle, and that the Roman people took courage after their misfortunes, thinking that it was not against an unconquerable and invulnerable foe that they were fighting, but one who could be made to suffer as well as themselves. XII. For this reason, as one of the consuls was dead, the people called for Marcellus, though he was absent, to become a successor. And in spite of the efforts of the government, they put off the day of election until he came to Rome from the army. He was elected consul by the votes of all the tribes, but it thundered at the time, and as the priests declared this an unpropitious omen, but did not dare openly to oppose his election for fear of the people, he himself voluntarily resigned his office. But he did not avoid military service, but was created proconsul, and returning to Nola and his army he harassed those who had chosen the side of Hannibal. When the latter hastily marched to the assistance of his friends, and offered to PG 44, trying to trial with Marcellus, he declined. But subsequently, when the greater part of the Carthaginian army was scattered in search of plunder, and no longer expecting an attack, he fell upon it. And distributed long lances, such as are used on shipboard, among his infantry, and instructed them to watch their opportunity and roll his slightest and set the Carthaginians, who had no javelin men, and whose heavy spears were only used to thrust with at close quarters. In consequence, it seems, of this, all who engaged with the Romans that day turned their backs and shamefully fled, losing 5,000 killed, 600 prisoners. While of those purpose, 4 were killed and 2 taken alive. And, what was of the greatest importance of all, on the third day after the above battle, 300 Spanish and Numidian cavalry deserted to the Romans, a thing which never had happened to Hannibal before, as, although his army was composed of so many different nations, he had been able for a very long time to inspire it with the same spirit. These men faithfully served Marcellus and the generals who succeeded him. XII. Marcellus, when elected consul for the third time, sailed to Sicily. For Hannibal's successes in the war had encouraged the Carthaginians to recover that island, especially as Syracusan politics were in a disturbed state in consequence of the death of the despot Hieronymus. And on this account the Roman army under Appius had already been sent there. When Marcellus had taken the command of this army, he received a large accession of Roman soldiers, whose misfortune was as follows. Of the troops who fought with Hannibal, and some fled, and some were taken alive, in such numbers that the Romans scarcely thought that they had left sufficient citizens to man the city walls. But this remnant was so full of pride and so great of soul, that, though Hannibal offered to release the captives for a small ransom, they would not take them, but refused by a decree of the Senate, and endured to see some of them put to death, and others sold out of Italy as slaves. The mass of those who had saved themselves by flight they sent to Sicily, with orders not to set foot on the soil of Italy until Hannibal was over. So when Marcellus went to Sicily, these men came in a body into his presence, and falling on the ground before him besought him to permit them to serve as honorable soldiers, promising with cries and tears that they would prove by their actions that it was more by their bad fortune
it's just
than
a
their
force of
cowardice that
habit.
they took place. Marcellus was touched with compassion, and moved to the Senate asking to be allowed to fill up from these men the vacancies which would occur in the ranks of his army. Much discussion followed, and at last the Senate decreed that Rome did not require the services of cowardly citizens, but if Marcellus nevertheless wished to make use of them, they must not receive any of the crowns and other rewards which are commonly bestowed by generals as the prizes of valor. This decree vexed Marcellus, and after the war in Sicily he returned to Rome and blamed the Senate that, in spite of all that he had done for them, they would not allow him to relieve so many citizens in such a miserable position. XIV. In Sicily, at this time, he had just cause of complaint against Hippocrates, the Syracusan general, who, favoring the Carthaginian side, and wishing to establish himself as despot, put to death many Romans at Leontini. Marcellus took Leontini by storm, and did no harm to the inhabitants, but flogged and executed all the deserters whom he found. Hippocrates first sent to Syracuse a story that Marcellus was exterminating the people of Leontini, and when this report had thrown the city into confusion he fell upon it and made himself master of it. Marcellus thereupon proceeded to Syracuse with his whole army, and encamping near the city sent ambassadors to tell them what had really happened in Leontini. By this, however, he gained nothing, as the Syracusans would not listen to him, for the party of Hippocrates was in the ascendant. He now attacked the city both by sea and land, Appius commanding the land forces, while Marcellus directed a fleet of 60 Quincorians 15, full of armed men and missile weapons. He raised the vast engine upon a raft made by lashing 8 ships together, and sailed with it to attack the wall, trusting to the numbers and excellence PG-46 of his siege engines, and to his own personal prestige. But Archimedes and his machines cared nothing for this, though he did not speak of any of these engines as being constructed by serious labor, but as the mere holiday sports of a geometrician. He he would not indeed have constructed them but at the earnest request of King Hero, who entreated him to leave the abstract for the concrete, and to bring his ideas within the comprehension of the people by embodying them in tangible forms. Ornixes and arches were at first who began to treat others renowned science and mechanics, cleverly illustrating it, including such problems as were hard to understand, by means of solid and actual instruments, as, for instance, both of them resorted to mechanical means to find a mean proportional, which is necessary for the solution of many other geometrical questions. This aided by the construction, from various curves and sections, of certain instruments called mesographs. Plato was much vexed at this, and inveighed against them for destroying the real excellence of geometry by making the region of Uranus and from within that of the senses, and become mixed up with bodies which would conquer much base serve labor. So mechanics became separated from geometry, and, long regarded with contempt by philosophy, was reckoned among the military arts. However, Archimedes, who was a well-to-do friend of Hero, who never given thought he could move any given weight whatever, and, as
trying to take the hill, Hamburger Hill,
he declared that if he were given another world to stand upon, he could move this upon which we live. Hero wondered at this, and begged him to take the theory into practice, and show him something great moved by a small horse. Archimedes took a three-masted ship, a transport in the king's navy, which had just been dragged up on land with great labor and many men. In this he placed her usual complement of men and cargo, and then sitting at some distance, without any trouble, by gently pulling with his hand the end of a system of pulleys, he dragged it towards him with as smooth and even a motion as if it were passing over the sea. The king wondered greatly at this, and PG-47, perceiving the value of his arts, prevailed upon Archimedes to construct for him a number of machines, some for the attack and some for the defense of the city, of which he himself did not make use, as he spent most of his life in unwarlike and literary leisure. But now these engines were ready for use in Syracuse, and also, the inventor was present to direct the working. XV. So when the Romans attacked by sea and land at once, the Syracusans were at first terrified and silent, dreading that nothing could resist such an armament. But Archimedes opened fire from his machines, throwing upon the land forces all manner of darts and great stones, with an incredible noise and violence, which no man could withstand. But those upon whom they fell were struck down in heaps, and their ranks thrown into confusion, while some of the ships were suddenly seized by iron hooks, and by a counterbalancing weight were drawn up and then plunged to the bottom. Others they caught by irons like hands or claws suspended from cranes, and first pulled them up by their posts till they stood upright upon their sterns, and then cast down into the water, or by means of windlasses and tackles worked inside the city, dashed them against the cliffs and rocks at the base of the walls, with terrible destruction to their crews. Often was seen the fearful sight of a ship lifted out of the sea into the air, swaying and balancing about, until the men were all thrown out or overwhelmed with stones from slings, when the empty vessel would either be dashed against the fortifications, or dropped into the sea by the claws being let go. The great engine which Marcellus was bringing up on the raft, called the Harp, with some resemblance to that instrument, was, while standing at a distance, struck by a stone of 10 tons weight, and then another, which fell with a terrible crash, breaking the platform on which the machine stood, loosening its bolts, and tearing asunder the bolts which supported it. Marcellus, despairing of success, drove off the ships as fast as possible, and sent orders to the land forces to retreat. In a council of war, it was determined to make another assault by night. For they argued that the straining cords which Archimedes used to propose missiles required a long distance toward PG-48, and would make the shot fly over them at close quarters, and be practically useless, as they required a long stroke. But he, it appears, had long before prepared engines suited for short as well as long distances, and short darts to use in them. And from many small loopholes pierced through the wall small scorpions, as they are called, stood ready to shoot the enemy, though invisible to them. XPI. When then they attacked, expecting that they would not be seen, they again encountered a storm of blows from stones which fell perpendicularly upon their heads and darts which were thrown from all parts of the wall. They were forced to retire, and when they came within range of the larger machines, missiles were showered upon them as they retreated, destroying many men and throwing the ships into great disorder, without their being able to retaliate. For most of the engines on the walls had been devised by Archimedes, and the Romans thought that they were fighting against gods and not men, as destruction fell upon them from invisible hands. XBI. However, Marcellus escaped unhurt, and sarcastically said to his own engineers, "Are we to give in to this furious other geometrician, who sits at his ease by the seashore and plays at upsetting our ships, to a lasting disgrace, and surpasses the 100-handed giant of fable by hurling so many weapons at us at once?" For indeed all the other Syracusans were merely the limbs of Archimedes, and his mind alone directed and guided everything. All of their arms were made a sign, and the city trusted those weapons solely for defense and safety. At length Marcellus, seeing that the Romans had become so scared that if only a rope or small beam was seen over the wall they would turn and fly, crying out that Archimedes was bringing some engine to bear upon them, ceased assaulting the place, and trusted to Tyre alone to reduce it. Yet Archimedes had so great a mind and such immense philosophic speculations that although by inventing these engines he had acquired the glory of a more than human intellect, he would not condescend to leave behind him any writings upon the subject regarding PG-49, the whole business of mechanics and the useful arts as base and older, but placed his whole study and delight in those speculations in which absolute beauty and excellence appear unhampered by the necessities of life, and argument is made to soar above its subject matter, since by the latter only all can. Outward appearance, but by the other accuracy of reasoning and wondrous power, can be attained, for it is impossible in the whole science of geometry to find more difficult hypotheses explained on clear or more simple principles than in his works. Some attribute this to his natural genius, others say that his indefatigable industry made his work seem as though it had been done without labor, though it cost much. For no man by himself could find out the solution of his problems, but as he reads, he begins to think that he could have discovered it himself, by so smooth and easy a road does he lead one up to a point to be proved. One cannot therefore disbelieve the stories which are told of him, how he seemed ever bewitched by the song of some indwelling siren of his soul so as to forget to eat his food, and to neglect his person, and how, when dragged forcibly to the baths and perfumers, he would draw geometrical figures with the ashes on the harp, and when his body was anointed would trace lines on it with his finger, absolutely possessed and inspired by the joy he felt in his art. he discovered many beautiful problems, and instead begged his relatives and friends to place upon his tomb when he died a cylinder enclosed in a sphere, and to write on it the proof of the ratio of the containing solid to the containing XBII. Such was Archimedes, who at this time rendered himself, and as far as laying him, the city, invincible. During the blockade, Marcellus took Megara, one of the most ancient of the Greek cities in Sicily, and also captured Hippocrates' camp at Acre with the destruction of more than 8,000 of his men, attacking them just as they were fencing the palisades of the rampart. He overran a great part of Sicily, and used cities to revolt from Carthage, and beat all forces that opposed him. As time went on, he took prisoner Lysimachus, a Spartan, PG 50, and he was sailing out of the harbor of Syracuse. The Syracusans desired to ransom this man, and Marcellus, in the course of many negotiations and conferences about him, noticed that a certain tower was carelessly guarded, and that man might be introduced into it secretly, as the wall near it was easy to climb. Having, from his frequent journeys to confer with the citizens near this tower, gained a good idea of its height, he prepared scaling ladders, and waited till the Syracusans were engaged in celebrating the feast of Artemis, and given up to drinking and amusement. Not only did he gain the tower unobserved, but was able to occupy the whole circuit of wall with his troops, and to break into the Hexapla. 16. When the Syracusans began to discover their position and muster for their defense, he ordered trumpets to sound on all sides, which produced great terror and tumult, as they imagined that no part of the walls remained untaken. Yet the strongest, and that too the largest and finest part of the city, was still left, called Acrotina, because it is fortified on the side near the outer town, part of which is called Neapolis, and part Taish. XIX. These parts of the city were captured, and at daybreak Marcellus moved down through the Hexapla, amidst the congratulations of his officers. It is said that when, from the high ground he surveyed that great and fair city, he burst into tears, thinking how sadly it would soon be changed in appearance when sacked by his soldiers. For none of his officers dared to oppose the soldiers when they demanded the privilege of plunder, and the men encouraged them to burn and destroy. But Marcellus would not so much as entertain the idea of this, but, much against his will, was forced to permit them to carry off the movable property and slaves, though he forbade them to touch freemen, and gave strict orders that none of the citizens of Syracuse should be slain, dishonored, or enslaved. Yet even after moderating their license to this extent, he thought that the city was sadly ill-treated, and even in such a moment of triumph he showed great sorrow and sympathy for it, as he saw such great wealth and comfort swept away in a few hours. For the treasure was PG 51, said to be not less than that which was afterwards taken from Carthage itself. The rest of the city was taken after a short time by treachery, and the soldiers insisted upon plundering it, with the exception of the royal treasury, which was confiscated to the state. Marcellus was especially grieved at the fate of Archimedes. He was studying something by himself upon a figure which he had drawn, to which he had so utterly given up his thoughts and his sight that he did not notice the assault of the Romans and the capture of the city, and when the soldiers suddenly appeared before him and ordered him to follow him into the presence of Marcellus, he refused to do so before he had finished his problem and its solution. The man hereupon in a rage drew his sword and killed him. Others say that the Roman fell upon him at once with a sword to kill him, but he, seeing him, begged him to wait for a little while, that he might not leave his skill imperfect, and that while he was reflecting upon it, he was slain. A third story is that as he was carrying into Marcellus's presence his mathematical instruments, sundials, spheres, and quadrants, by which the eye might measure the magnitude of the sun, some soldiers met with him, and supposing that there was gold in the boxes, slew him. But all agreed that Marcellus was much grieved, that he turned away from his murderer as though he were an object of abhorrence to gods and men, and that he sought out his family and treated them well. XX. The Romans up to this time had given foreign nations great proofs of their skill in war and their courage in battle, but had not shown any evidences of kindness, clemency, or any social virtue. Marcellus seems to have been the first who exhibited the Romans in a more amiable light to the Greeks. For he so dealt with his adversaries, and treated so many individuals and cities with kindness that even if any harsh treatment did befall Enna, or Megara, or Syracuse, it was not to be more by the fault of the vanquished than of the victors. I will mention one instance out of many. There was a city in Sicily called Engen, of no great size, but very ancient, and renowned for the appearance thereof the goddesses called mothers. The foundation of the temple is ascribed PG 52 to the Cretans, and they used to show certain lances and helmets inscribed, some with the name of Mariones, some of Ulysses, that is, Odysseus, which was dedicated to these goddesses. This city was eager to espouse the Carthaginian side, but was prevailed upon by one Nicias, the leading man of the city, to join the Romans, by freely speaking his mind in the public assembly and proving that his opponents did not consult the true interests of the state. These men, fearing his power and high reputation, determined to kidnap him and deliver him up to the Carthaginians. Nicias, discovering this plot, quietly took measures for his own security, but publicly made unseemly speeches about the mothers, and spoke of the received tradition of their appearance with doubt and contempt, to the delight of his enemies, as he seemed to be by these actions as upon the treatment which they meant to inflict upon him. When all their preparations for seizing him were complete, there was a public assembly of the citizens, and Nicias, in the midst of a speech upon state policy, suddenly fell to the ground, and after a short time, as all men were, naturally, silent with surprise, he raised his head, and turning around he began to speak in deep and trembling tones, which he gradually made shriller and more intense, until, seeing the whole theater, where the meeting was, silent with horror, he threw off his cloak, tore his tunic, and, half naked, rushed to the gate of the theater, crying out that he was pursued by the mothers. As no one dared to touch or stop him, from fear of the gods, but all made way for him, he passed out of the city gate, not omitting any of the cries and trembling the body of a person under demoniacal possession. His wife, who was in a secret, and her husband's confederate, first brought her children and prostrated herself as a suppliant before the goddesses, and then under pretense of seeking her wandering husband managed to leave the city without opposition. Thus they safely reached Marcellus at Syracuse. And when, after enduring many a fuss and insolent proceeding from the people of England, Marcellus took them all prisoners, and imprisoned them, meaning put them all to death, Vickers at first stood by weeping, but at length, embracing Marcellus as a suppliant, he begged for PG 53, the lives of his countrymen, beginning with his own personal enemies, until he relented, and set them all at liberty. Nor did he touch their city, but gave Vickers and Owens and Bruce peasants. This story is told by Posidonius the philosopher. XXI. When the Romans recalled Marcellus to conduct the war in their own country, he removed most of the beautiful ornaments of the city of Syracuse to be admired at his triumphal procession, and to adorn Rome. For at that time Rome neither possessed nor knew any works of art, nor had she any delicacy of taste in such matters. Filled with the blood-stained arms and spoils of barbarians, and crowded with trophies of war and memorials of triumphs, she was no pleasant or delightful spectacle, fit to feed the eyes of unwarlike and luxurious spectators. But, as Epaminondas called the plain of Phthia the stage of Ares, and Xenophon called Ephesus the workshop of war, so, in my opinion, you might call Rome at that time, the goods of Hinder, the domain of Ares,
Corn fact.
Therefore Marcellus gained the greater credit with Holder, because he enriched the city with statues possessing the Hellenic grace and truth of nature, while Fabius Maximus was more esteemed by the elders. He neither touched nor removed anything of the kind from the city of Jerusalem, which he took, but carried off all the money and other property, and let the statues remain, quoting the proverb, "Let us," said he, "leave the town as their angry gods." We blame Marcellus's proceedings as being invidious for Rome, because he had led not only men, but also gods as captives in his triumph, and also because the people, who before this were accustomed neither to fight nor to till the ground, and were ignorant of luxury and indolent pleasures, like the heracles of Euripides, and polished, rough, but skilled in useful arts, were made by Marcellus the idol, maddened connoisseurs of the fine arts, and wasted the greater part of the day in talk about them. He, however, prided himself upon this even before Greeks, saying that he had taught the ignorant Romans to prize and admire the glories of Greek art. PG 54, XXIX. Marcellus, whose enemies opposed his claim to a triumph, on the ground that the campaign in Sicily was not completely finished, and that he did not deserve a third triumph, so far gave Laius to lead the greater triumphal procession as far as the Alban Mount, and only to enter the city in a lesser form which the Greeks call ruin, and the Romans ovation. The general conducts this, not, as in the triumph, dividing that chariot before with a crown of laurel, and with trumpets sounding before him, but walking on foot in low shoes surrounded by flute players, and crowned with myrtle, so as to look unwarlike and joyous rather than terrible. And this is a great proof to me that in old times it was the manner and not the importance of the things achieved that settled the form of triumph. Those generals who had gained their point by battle and slaughter probably made their entry in that martial and terrible fashion, having, as is customary in illustrations of armies, crowned and wreathed their arms with abundance of laurel, whereas the generals who without an appeal to arms had settled matters satisfactorily by negotiation and persuasive eloquence, were given by custom this peaceful and festive entry into the city. For the king was a peaceful instrument, and wherefore is the cable plant of Aphrodite, above all the gods hates violence and war. This form of triumph is called ovation, not from the cry of heaven, as most people think, for the other also is accompanied with shouts and songs, but the word had been twisted by the Greeks into one that has a meaning in their language, and also they are convinced that some honor is paid to Dionysus in this ceremony, which God named Ebios and Priamos. It is curious to observe that the Greek law arranged the sacrifices differently to those of Rome. In spite of those ex-generals who had accomplished their purpose by persuasion or broad sacrifice of ox, while those who have done it by ad hoc recon, or the warlike excess, they thought that a victory gained by clever negotiation was greater and more befitting human beings than one gained by force and courage. Which is to be preferred, I leave to my reader's consideration. XXII. When Marcellus entered upon his fourth PG 55 consulship, his enemies induced the Syracusans to send their deputation to Rome, to complain loudly to the Senate of the cruel and unjust treatment which they had received from him. Marcellus chanced to be performing some sacrifice in the capital. So when the Syracusans came to the assembled Senate, begging for a hearing that justice might be done them, the other consuls stopped them, feeling that Marcellus ought not to be attacked in his absence. But Marcellus, as soon as he heard of it, came to the Senate house, seated himself as consul, on the throne chair, and dispatched business. Then, when this was finished, he came down and placed himself as a private person in the place where men on their trial usually stood, and called on the Syracusans to prove their charges against him. They were abashed at his majestic confidence of Damian North, and he who had been invincible in arms seemed to them yet more terrible and unapproachable in his consular purple. Nevertheless, encouraged by the enemies of Marcellus, they began their impeachment, and pleaded their cause in a piteous fashion, their chief point being that they, who were friends and allies of the Romans, had been treated in a way in which many other generals had forborne to treat hostile cities. Marcellus answered that they had done the Romans much harm, for which they had received no punishment, except such as could not be prevented in war, because victorious soldiers could not be restrained from sacking a town which they had won, and their city, he said, was taken because they had refused its frequent offers of terms of agreement. They could not urge that they had been forced into war by their despots, for they had themselves chosen those very despots with the intention of going to war. After both parties had been heard, the Syracusans, according to custom, left the Senate house. Marcellus
that was close.
Leaving his colleague to preside over the assembly, and stood outside the doors, without altering his usual demeanor, either from fear of the result or anger against the Syracusans, but serenely awaiting the verdict of the Senate. When the question was voted upon, and he was announced successful, the Syracusans prostrated themselves PG 56 before him, beseeching him with tears to put away his anger against themselves, and to show pity on the city, which was sensible to kindness, and would be grateful to him. Marcellus was touched by their appeal. He became reconciled to them, and was a constant benefactor to their city. He restored them their freedom, their laws, and what remained of their property, and the Senate confirmed his acts. In return for this, besides many other honors they passed along that whenever Marcellus or any of his descendants should land in Sicily, the Syracusans should wear garlands of flowers and hold a festival with sacrifices to the gods. XXIV. Next he proceeded against Hannibal. And whereas nearly all the other consuls and generals, after the disaster of Cannae had thought of nothing but avoiding battles with him, and no one had dared to measure himself with him in the field, he adopted the opposite course, arguing that while they fancied that they were wearing out Hannibal's army, they did not perceive that Italy was being consumed by it. Fabius, he urged, thought too much of safety, and by his policy of waiting, Rome, already drooping under its burdens, would at the end of the war perish as well as Hannibal. He was, he said, like those timid surgeons who shrink from using decisive remedies, and to mistake the sinking strength of the patient for the abatement of disease. His first act was to take some important Samnite towns which had revolted. Here he found great stores of corn and money, and took 3,000 of Hannibal's soldiers who were there as garrison. Next, when Hannibal defeated and killed CNS Fabius, the proconsul in Apulia, with a loss of 11 military tributes in the greater part of his army, Marcellus sent dispatches to Rome, bidding the citizens give him courage, for he was already on the march, and would abate Hannibal's exultation. Livy tells us that these dispatches, when read, did not diminish the grief of the Romans, but added to their fear, as they reflected that the risk they were about to run was so much more serious than the defeat they had sustained, as Marcellus was superior to Fabius. According to his dispatch, he instantly marched PG 57.
You can dodge.
Hannibal into Lucania, and
It doesn't have to be
some
artful.
strong hills near the city of Numistro, he himself encamped in the plain. On the following day, he was the first to draw out his army in battle array. Hannibal descended from his position.
How will this guy die? Come on.
And was scarcely over by dark, but without any decisive result. A day break he had been laid out his army and defied Hannibal to fight. But Hannibal retired. Marcellus, after stripping the forces of the enemy and burying his own dead, pursued. His skill and good fortune were greatly admired in this campaign, as he did not fall into any numerous ambuscades which were prepared for him by Hannibal, and in all his skirmishes came off victorious. For this reason, as the Domitian were defending, the Senate thought that it would be better to call the other consul away from Sicily than to recall Marcellus just as he was clearly engaged with Hannibal. When the other consul arrived, they bade him make Quintus Fabius dictator. For a dictator is not chosen by the people or by the Senate, but when other consuls or course comes forward publicly and names whom he pleases dictator. And this is the reason that the man so named is called dictator. For it does have Latin meaning to name. But it's something that the dictator is so called because he does not require any vote or show of hands, but upon his own responsibility dictates his orders. Indeed, the orders of magistrates which are called by the Greeks diatagmata are called edicts by the Romans. XXV. When Marcellus' colleague came to Rome from Sicily, he wished to name another person dictator, and, that he might not be forced to act against his inclination, he sailed away by night back to Sicily. Under these circumstances, the people nominated Quintus Fabius dictator, and the Senate wrote to Marcellus bidding him vote for this person. He did so, confirming the choice of the people, and was himself elected proconsul for the following year. After the conference with Fabius Maximus, which it was arranged that the latter should make the 10 months already, while Marcellus should comfortably anoint Hannibal and Silver, according to Ptolemy PG 58, assistance, he set out, and came upon Hannibal near Lisbon. Hannibal frequently shifted his camp, and tried to avoid a battle, but Marcellus was not to be shaken off, and at length attacked his position, and by skirmishing provoked him to fight. Marcellus sustained his attack, and the battle was put an end to by night. The next morning his troops were again withheld under arms, so that Hannibal in great anxiety called together the Carthaginians and besought them to fight as they had never done before. You see, said he, that even after our great victories, we do not rest in peace, unless we drive away this fellow. The armies met, and Marcellus seems to have lost the day by unseasonable mandate. His right wing was suffering, and he ordered up one of the legions to support it. But this change produced confusion in the ranks, and gave the victory to the enemy, with a loss of 2,700 men to the Romans. Marcellus, after retiring to his fortified camp, called together his soldiers, and reproached them, saying that he saw before him the arms and bodies of many Romans, but not one true Roman. They begged forgiveness, but he answered that he could not forgive them when defeated, but would forgive them if victorious. On the morning he said that he would renew the battle, in order that the Romans might learn their victory before they heard of their defeat. After these words he gave orders that the troops which had given way should be supplied with rations of barley instead of corn, which had such an effect upon them, that although many were suffering from the hurts in the battle, yet there was not one who did not suffer more from the reproaches of Marcellus than from his wounds. XXVI. At daybreak the scarlet robe, the well-known signal of battle, was displayed from the general's tent. The disgraced troops, at their own request, were placed in the first rank. The rest of the army followed under their officers. Hannibal, hearing of this, exclaimed, Hercules, what can one do with a man who knows not how to bear either good or bad fortune? This is the only general who, when victorious, allows his foe no rest, and when defeated takes none himself. We shall always, it seems, have to be fighting this man, who is equally excited PG 59, to attack by his confidence when victor, and his shame when vanquished. In the battle, the men on each side were fighting on equal terms, when Hannibal ordered his elephants to be brought into the front rank and to attack the Roman armies. Great tumult and disturbance was produced by this, but one of the tribunes, by name Flavius, seizing a standard, stood his ground, and struck the first elephant with the spiked end of the staff, till he forced him to turn back. He then attacked the next one, and those that followed. Marcellus, seeing this, ordered his cavalry to ride as fast as they could to the scene of the confusion and complete the rout of the enemy. They charged briskly and pursued the flying Carthaginians, cutting them down up to their very camp. Great havoc was wrought by the wounded elephants among them, and in all, over 8,000 are said to have perished. Of the Roman force, 3,000 were killed, and almost all the survivors were wounded, which circumstance enabled Hannibal to leave his camp by night unmolested and remove himself from the neighborhood of Marcellus. For Marcellus could not pursue, because of the number of wounded, but marched in a leisurely manner towards Campania, and passed the summer at Sinusa, recruiting the help of his soldiers. XXVI Hannibal, after he had thus torn himself free from Marcellus, sent his armies to plunder Italy as recklessly as though it were disbanded. And though Marcellus was still spoken of, his enemies induced Publius Valus, a clever and violent partisan, to attack him. This man frequently addressed assemblies of the people and urged them to transfer the command to another general, since Marcellus, he said, after a little sparring with the enemy, had gone to the hot baths to refresh himself as if after a gymnastic contest. Marcellus, hearing of this, left the army in charge of his legates, and went to Rome to clear his reputation from these slanders. But, in consequence of them, he found that he was to undergo a trial. The day was fixed. The people assembled in the Circus Flaminius. The tribunals rose and impeached him. Marcellus spoke shortly and simply in his own defense, but the highest and noblest citizens spoke at great length in his praise. PG 60, calling on the people not to show themselves by their low words judges of more than Hannibal, who was always as eager to avoid fighting Marcellus, as he was to fight with other generals. After these speeches had been delivered, the accuser was proved to be so far wrong in his impeachment, that Marcellus was not only honorably acquitted, but actually elected
Territories, I'm scared of him. Kill me,
Assumed gods.
please don't kill me, Territories. Please, please. I'll do anything you say.
After this, he wished to consecrate the temple, which he had built out of the spoils of Sicily, to the glory of the Lord, but being commanded by the priests on the ground that 2 vows could not be included.
Focus on territories.
He began to build another one, being very much vexed at the opposition he encountered, but influenced by omens.
Fear is the mind killer.
Occurrences, such as several temples being struck by lightning, and the gold from the temple of Jupiter being on by the mines. It was also reported that an ox had spoken with a human voice, and that the child had been born with the head of an elephant, though the priests kept him in Rome to conduct the expiatory rites and atonements for these, though he was fighting in order to take the field. For no man ever was so passionately desirous of anything as he was to measure himself with Hannibal.
Gator brush?
His one dream by night, his only talk to his friends and colleagues, his sole prayer to the gods was that he might meet Hannibal in a fair field. I believe that he will most willingly have enclosed both armies within a wall or palisade, and there have fought out before. Had it not been that he was now loaded with honors, and had given proof of his superiority in wisdom compared to any other general, men would have said that he showed a more bold ambition than he could at the man of his age. For he was over 60 years old when he entered upon his 5th consulship. XXIX. However, when he had completed the necessary sacrifices and purifications and joined by the soothsayers, he took the field with his colleague, and harassed Hannibal much in the country between the towns of Vesh and Venetia. Hannibal declined battle, but, learning that a PG 61 force was detached from the Roman army to attack the Episophyrian Locrians, he made an ambuscade on the mountain near Paeturia, and defeated them with a loss of 2,500 men. This excited Marcellus, and he led his forces nearer to those of Hannibal. There was between the 2 camps that held some strength as a military post, overgrown with wood. Its slope in the size afforded a view of either camp, and upon the north the sources of several mountain streams.
Territories? No, please, Territories, give me, have mercy on me.
Opposition as this, he had not occupied it, but left it to the enemy. It seems that he indeed thought it a good place to encamp in, but much better to lay an ambuscade in. And, wishing to use it rather for this purpose, he filled the woods and goings with javelin and spearmen, persuaded that the place itself would, from its excellent qualities, attract the Romans into it. Nor was he deceived in this expectation. For at once there was much talk in the Roman army about the necessity of occupying
It was Territories.
You
killed me so many times.
Now Marcellus determined to ride forward with a few horsemen and reconnoiter it, so he sent for a
Well,
soothsayer
at
and
least it
offered
was over
sacrifice.
quick.
When the first victim was slain, the soothsayer showed him that the liver had no head. On sacrificing for the second time, the head appeared of unusual size, while all the other organs were excellent, and this seemed to set at rest the fear which had been caused by the former. Yet the soothsayer said that they were even more distant and this. For when after very bad and menacing victims unusually excellent ones appear, the sudden change is itself suspicious. But, not fire, not walls of iron can hinder fate. As Peter says, Marcellus rode forth with his colleague Crispus, who was military tribune, in all 220 horsemen. Of these none were Romans. They were Etruscans, with the exception of 20 men from Vragal who had given constant proofs of their courage and devotion to Marcellus. On the overhanging PG 62 crest of the woody hill, a man, unseen by the Romans, was watching their army. He signaled to the men in ambush what was going on, so that they permitted Marcellus to ride close to them, and then suddenly burst out upon him, and surrounding his little force on all sides, struck them through their darts, pursued such as ran away, and fought with those who stood their ground. These were the 23 villains. The Etruscans at the outset ran away panic-stricken. But these men forming together defended the consuls until Crispus, struck by 2 arrows, galloped away, and Marcellus was pierced through the side of the lance. Then even the few survivors of the 3 villains left him lying there, and snatching up his son, who was wounded, made their way back to the camp. The loss amounted to a little over 40 killed, and 5 victors and 18 horsemen taken. Crispus, after a few days, died of his wounds. Such a misfortune as this, losing both consuls in one battle, never before baffled the Romans. XXX. Hannibal heard of the fate of all the rest with indifference, but when he was told that Marcellus had fallen, he himself hastened to the place, and stood for a long time beside the corpse, admiring its strength and beauty. He made no boastful speech, and showed no joy in his countenance, as a man who had slain a troublesome and dangerous enemy, but, wondering at the strangeness of his ending, he drew the ring from the dead man's finger, and had the corpse decently attired and burned. The relics he gathered into a silver urn, upon which he placed a golden crown, and sent it to Marcellus' son. But on the way some Numidians fell with the party who were escorting the urn, and while they tried to take it away and the others struggled to retain it, the bones were scattered on the ground. Hannibal, on hearing of this, said, nothing can be done against the will of heaven. He ordered the Numidians to be punished, but took no further thought about collecting or sending away the relics of Marcellus, concluding that some god had decreed the strange death and strange lack of burial which had befallen him. This is the story related by Cornelius Nepos and Valerius Maximus, but Livy and Augustus Cr declare that the urn was brought to his son, and PG 63, that it was splendidly buried. Besides his monuments at Rome, there was a gymnasium at Catana in Sicily which bore his name, and statues and votive tablets from the plunder of Syracuse were set up in Santa Thrace in the temple of the gods called Gaberi, and in Linus Elos in the temple of Athena. On a statue there, according to Posidonius, these verses are written. This monument, O stranger, doth enshrine Marcellus, of the famous Claudian line, who 7 times was consul, and in fight his country's foes overthrew and put to flight. For the letter of this epitaph counted his 2 proconsulates as well as his 5 consulates. His family remained one of the chief in Rome down to the time of Marcellus, the nephew of Augustus, who was the son of Octavia, Augustus' sister, and Caius Marcellus. He died in the office of Alwag at bridegroom, having just married Augustus' daughter Julia. In honor of his memory, his mother Octavia established a library, and Augustus built a theater, both of which bore his name. Footnotes: 12. The Civic. 86. 13. Civic of Corona. The civic crown was made of oak leaves, and was given only to it who had saved the life of a fellow citizen in war. 14. Interrogates were appointed when there were no consuls, to hold comitia for the election of new ones. 15. Vessels of 5 banks of oars. 16. Hexagon, the place with 6 gates. PG 64. The comparison of Plautides with Marcellus. I. The particulars which we thought worth extracting from the histories of Plautides and Marcellus are related above. Their dispositions and habits were so nearly identical, for both were brave, laborious, and high-spirited, that the only point in which they differ appears to be that Marcellus put the inhabitants of several captured cities to the sword, whereas Epaminondas and Plautides never slew anyone after they had conquered him, nor enslaved any captured city. Indeed, had they been alive, it is said that the felons never would have so treated the town of Orconus. As to their exploits, that of Marcellus against the Gauls was great and wonderful. We drove before him with this little band of horsemen, so great a multitude of horsemen put together, the like of which one cannot easily find to have been done by any other general, and the killing of the chief of the enemy. The same thing was attempted by Plautides, but the despot was too quick for him, and he perished without succeeding in his effort. Yet with these we may compare his deeds had we put in figure, the most important and glorious of all his feats of arms, while we have no exploit of Marcellus which corresponds to his management of the ambuscade by which he brought back the exiled popular party to Thebes, and destroyed the despots. Indeed, of all deeds performed by secrecy and stratagem, this takes the hand. Hannibal, no doubt, was a terrible enemy to Rome, as were the Lacedaemonians to Thebes. Yet it is an established fact that Itagra and Iguta they gave way before Plautides, whereas Marcellus, according to Cludius, never once defeated Hannibal, but the general PG 65 appears to have remained undefeated until the time of Scipio. But in the lead, following Livy, Excion, Cornelius Nepos, and, among Greek historians, King Juba, the Hannibal suffered some defeats at the hands of Marcellus. Yet they never produced any single result, and we may suspect that the Africans sometimes only pretended to have lost the day. But what Marcellus is so justly admired for is that after such great armies had been looted, their generals killed, and the whole military system of Rome thrown into confusion, he inspired his troops with a confidence that enabled them to hold their own against the enemy. Meanwhile, his men from their former timid and disheartened condition, making them eager to distinguish themselves in battle, and, what is more, never to yield a victory without a determined struggle. And all this, as far as any single man could, was effected by Marcellus. For whereas his troops had been accustomed to be well satisfied if they escaped with their lives from Hannibal, he taught them to be ashamed of surviving defeat, too much to give way ever so little, and to grieve if they were not victorious. Aye. Since, then, Pelopidas never was defeated when he was in command, and Marcellus gained more victories than any Roman of his time. Perhaps he who was so hard to conquer may, in consideration of his many successes, be held equal to it who never suffered a reverse. Moreover, the one took Syracuse, while the other failed before Lace won. But I hold it a greater feat than taking Sicily, to have marched upon Sparta, and been the first man to cross the Eurotas, unless indeed it should be said that the credit of this exploit belongs more to Epaminondas than to Pelopidas, as also does the battle of Leuctra, whereas the glory of Marcellus' achievements is all his own. For he took Syracuse alone, and beat the Gauls without his colleague, and, with no one to assist him, but everyone coming back, he measured himself with Hannibal and changed the whole complexion of the war, by being the first to introduce a daring policy. Aye. As for their deaths, I can praise neither one nor the other, but I am grieved at the unworthy manner of their end. It is strange, that Hannibal was never even wounded in a number of battles which it would weary PG 66, one to recount. And I admire the conduct of Crescentus and Xanath and Syrocena, who, when standing with his weapon drawn, about to strike an enemy, heard the trumpet sound that recalled, and leaving his man, quietly and orderly retreated. Yet Plautides may be excused by his excitement during a battle, and his courage, which urged him to avenge himself on the enemy, for the best thing is for the general to be victorious and to survive, and the next, for him to die breathing forth his life in valor as Euripides says. Thus his death becomes no accident, but a premeditated end. And besides, Plautides' spirit, the assured victory which he saw within his grasp, could but kill the despot, not unreasonably made him make his desperate attack. For it would have been hard for him to obtain another opportunity of distinguishing himself so gloriously. But Marcellus, without any necessity, without the excitement which sometimes in perilous circumstances overpowers man's reason, pushed heedlessly into danger, and died the death of a spy rather than a general, risking his 5 consulships, his 3 triumphs, his spoils and trophies won from kings against the worthless lives of Iberian and Eulenian mercenaries. They themselves must have felt ashamed at their success, that the bravest, most powerful, and most celebrated of the Romans should have fallen among a reconnoitering party of Frigillans. Still, let not this be regarded as a reproach to these great men, but rather a complaint addressed on their own behalf, especially to that courage, to which they sacrificed all their other virtues, disregarding their lives, as though their loss would fall upon themselves only, and not upon their friends and native country. After his death, Pelopidas was buried by his allies, fighting for whom he died. But Marcellus was buried by the enemy at whose hands he fell. The first was an enviable end, but the other is greater, as the spectacle of an enemy honoring the valor by which he has suffered is greater than that of a friend showing gratitude to a friend. In the one case it is the man's glory alone that is respected, in the other, his usefulness and value are as much thought of as his courage. PG-67 Life of Parasites. Arsacides, the son of Lysimachus, was of the tribe Antiochus, and the township of Aloki. There are various reports current about his property, some saying that he lived in poverty, and that on his death he left 2 daughters, who remained a long while unmarried because of their poverty. While this general opinion is contradicted by Demetrius of Phalerum in his book on Socrates, where he mentions an estate at Phalerum which he knew had belonged to Arsacides, in which he was buried, and also adds his other grounds for supposing him to have been a wealthy man. First, he points out that Arsacides was Archon Eponymous, an office for which men were chosen by lot from the richest class, that of the Pentecost Eumeni, or citizens who possessed a yearly income of 500 million 17 of Brahma liquid produce. Secondly, he mentions the fact that he was ostracized. Now, ostracism never was used against poor men, but against those who descended from great and wealthy houses, and his pride made them feel disliked by their fellow citizens. Thirdly, and lastly, he writes that Arsacides placed in the temple of Dionysus tripod dedicated to the god Dionysus Chorus, which even in my own town are still to be seen, and which bear the inscription, the tribe Antiochus won the prize. Arsacides was Coricus. Archus passed on the course. Glaucus, which seems to be the strongest argument of all, is really the weakest. Epaminondas, whom all men know to have been working to have passed his life in the greatest possible poverty, and Plato the philosopher, both exhibited excellent courses, the former bearing the expense of a course of men playing on the flute, while the PG-68 latter exhibited a separate 18 course of boys. Plato's expenses were borne by Dionysius of Syracuse, and those of Epaminondas by Plotinus and his friends. Good men do not always refuse to receive presents from their friends, but, though they will scorn to make money by them, they willingly receive them to further an honorable ambition. And this, moreover, proves that Demetrius is wrong in the matter of the tripods, because from the time of the Persian War to the end of the Peloponnesian War there are only 2 Arsacides recorded as victors, neither of whom can be identified with the son of Lysimachus, as the father of them was Anathylus, and the other was a much more modern personage, as he
why you wanna do me like that, Waze?
After the archonship of Theoclides, and from the name of the poet or teacher of the chorus, Archistratus, whose name was the Persian War, but who taught several choruses, that is, wrote several successful plays during the Peloponnesian War. These remarks of Panthus must, however, be received with caution. As to ostracism, any man of unusual talent, nobility of birth, or remarkable or demon, the tutor of Pericles, was ostracized, because he was thought to be a man of superior intellect. Even Venus tells us that Arsacides obtained the office of Archon, not by lot, but by the universal voice of the people.
Please don't kill me, wait.
As Demetrius himself admits, it is highly probable that his great reputation after such glorious successes may have obtained for him an office usually reserved for men of wealth. Indeed, Demetrius evidently tries to redeem both Arsacides and Socrates from the reproach of poverty, as though he imagined it to be a great misfortune, for he tells us that Socrates not only possessed a house, but also 7 men which were borrowed by
Sorry about that, Wade.
Arsacides became much attached to Cleisthenes.
Don't be mad, Wade.
After the PG-69 expulsion of the sons of Pisistratus. But his reverence and admiration for Lycurgus the Lacedaemonian only led him to prefer the music that Some say that even as children were always 2 opposite sides, both entailed in serious matters, and so betrayed their several dispositions. Mephistopheles being unscrupulous, daring, and careless by what means he obtained success, while the character of Arsacides was solid and just, incapable of deceit or others even in sport. Ariston of Chios tells us that their hatred of one another arose from a love affair. Stesilaus of Chios, the most beautiful youth of his time, was passionately adored by both of them with an affection which passed all bounds. Nor did it cease their rivalry when his once youthful bloom had passed away, but Isisus had nearly developed a married trial. They each plunged into politics with great vigor and with utterly different views. Then Aesopus obtained a large following, and thus became an important power in the state, so that when someone said to him that he would make a very good governor of Athens, provided he would
that was bad, that was pretty cool.
He answered, never had their rule with my friends are to reap no more benefit from it than anyone else. Arsacides, on the other hand, pursued his way through political life unattended, because, in the first place, he neither wished to do wrong in order to please his friends, nor to vex them by refusing to gratify their wishes. And also because he observed that many men when they were supported by a strong party of friends who were opposed to the commission of wrong and illegal acts. Therefore, conceive that a good citizen ought to trust entirely to his own rectitude, both in word and in deed. Aye. In spite of this, however, when Aristocles was using every kind of political maneuver to thwart him, he was forced to retaliate by similar measures, partly in order to defend himself, and partly to check the power of his opponent, which depended on the favor shown him by the people. He thought it better that he should occasionally do the people some slight wrong than that PG-70, then Aristocles should obtain unlimited power. At last, when Aristocles even proposed some useful measure, he opposed it and threw it out. On this occasion he could not refrain from saying, as he left the public assembly, that the Athenians could not be saved unless they threw both himself and Aristocles into the Barathrum. 19. Another time he brought forward a bill, which was vehemently debated upon, but was at length carried. But just before the votes of the people were given, he, perceiving from what had been said that it would prove a bad law, withdrew it. Frequently he made use of other persons to bring forward propositions, lest the public should suffer from the contest which would otherwise take place between Aristocles and himself. Indeed, his evenness of temper was the more remarkable when contrasted with the changefulness of other politicians, for he was never unduly excited by the honor which would be bestowed upon him, and bore misfortune with a quiet cheerfulness, thinking it to be his duty to serve his country, not merely without being paid for it in money, but without even gaining honor for so doing. This was the reason, I suppose, that when Chilos' verses on Hipparchus were being recited in the theater, not just to see, but just he loves to be. and he befuddles his noble mind with thought, to reap a harvest of great designs. All men turned and looked towards Aristeides, thinking that he came nearest to this ideal virtue. IV. He stood up vigorously for justice, not merely when it was his interest and that of his friends, but when it was in favor of his enemies and contrary to his own personal feelings to do so. It is said that once when arguing a cause against one of his enemies in a court of law, the judges refused to hear the other party speak in his own defense, after listening to the speech of Aristeides, but were allowed to condemn him unheard. But this Aristeides came forward and vigorously supported his antagonist's claim to be allowed his legal right of G71, replied. Again, when acting as arbitrator between two persons, one of them said that his adversary had done much wrong to Aristeides. My good man, said he, do not tell me of this, but tell me whether he has wronged you or not, for I am judging your cause, not my own. When elected to administer the revenues of the state, he proved that not only his own colleagues, but those who had previously held office, had embezzled large sums, especially Themistocles. A clever man, how the confusion called. For this cause Themistocles, when Aristeides' accounts were audited, prosecuted him on a charge of malversation, and, according to Idomeneus, obtained a verdict. However, the better class of citizens being grieved at this, not only remitted the fine, but at once elected him to the same office. He now pretended to regret his former rigor, and was much more earnest in performing his duties, which rendered him very popular with those who were in the habit of embezzling the public money, so that they were loud in his praise, and canvassed the people on his behalf, trusting that he might be re-elected Archon. But when the voting was about to begin, he rose and rebuked the Athenians. When, he said, I did you true and honorable service, I was disgraced by you. Now, when I have permitted much of the public money to be stolen, I am thought to be an excellent citizen. But I myself am more ashamed of the honor which you now pay me, than I am of my former conviction, and I am sorry for you, because among you it is esteemed more honorable to the evildoers and to guard the national property. I speak thus in exposing the peculation which was being practiced. He closed the mouths of all those who were so loudly commending him as an honest man, but gained the applause of all true and honorable men. V. When Datis was sent by Darius, not only to punish the Athenians for the burning of Sardis, but really to enslave the whole of Greece, he landed at Marathon, and commenced laying waste the country. Of the 10 generals appointed by the Athenians for the conduct of the war, PG 72, Miltiades had the highest reputation, while Aristeides held the second place. He used his influence in the council of war to support the proposition of Miltiades to fight the enemy at once, and also, as each general had sole command for one day, when his day came round, he gave it to Miltiades, thus teaching his colleagues that obedience to those who know how to command is not any disgrace, but a noble and useful act. By this means he was enabled to put an end to the rivalries between the generals, and to strengthen Miltiades by concentrating in him the power which had before been passed from hand to hand. In the battle, the Athenian center was hard pressed, as the Persians resisted longest in that part of their line which was opposed to the tribes of Leontis and Antiochus. Here Themistocles and Aristeides each showed conspicuous valor, fighting side by side, for the former was of the tribe Leontis, the latter of the tribe Antiochus. After the victory was won, and the Persians forced into their ships, they were observed not to sail towards the archipelago, but to be proceeding in the direction of Athens. Fearing that they might catch the city defenseless, the Athenians determined to hurry back with 9 tribes to protect it, and they accomplished their march in one day. Aristeides, with his own tribe, was left to guard the prisoners and the plunder, and well maintained his reputation. Although gold and silver was lying about in heaps, with all kinds of rich tapestry and other countless treasures, he would neither touch them himself nor allow the others to do so, though some helped themselves without his knowledge. Among these was Callias, the torchbearer in the Eleusinian mysteries. One of the prisoners, taking him for a king because of his long hair and blade, fell on his knees before him, and having received his hand as a pledge for his safety, pointed out to him a great store of gold concealed in a pit. Callias now acted most cruelly and wickedly. He took the gold, and killed the poor man for fear that he should tell it to the others. It is said that ever afterwards the descendants of Callias were referred by the common poets as being the family of the man who found the gold in the pit. Immediately after those events, Aristeides was chosen as Archon Eponymous, that is, the Archon because his PG 73, named to the year. Demetrius of Phalerum says that he filled this office shortly before his death, and after the Battle of Plat. But in the public records of Athens one cannot find any Archon of the name of Aristeides among the many who filled the office after Xanthippines, in whose archonship Mardonius was defeated at Plat, whereas the name of Aristeides does occur next to that of Philebus, in whose archonship the victory at Marathon was won. P.I. Of all the virtues of Aristeides, his justice was that which chiefly commended itself to the people, being that which is of most value in ordinary life. Hence it was that he, although a poor man of mean birth, he had gained for himself the truly imperial title of the Just, a title which has never been emulated by kings and despots, who delight in being called the city taker, the thunderbolt, or the victorious, while some are known as the eagle or the hawk, because they are enabled for strength and lawless violence and justice and goodness. Yet for all this, the gods, to whom they so presumptuously liken themselves, excel mankind chiefly in 3 attributes, namely in immortality, in power, and in goodness, whereof goodness is by far the most glorious and divine quality. Near empty space, and all the elements possess immortality, while earthquakes, thunderbolts, violent winds and rushing waters have great power, but justice and equity belong to the gods alone, because of the reason and intelligence which they possess. Now most men regard the gods with admiration, with fear, and with reverence. With admiration, because they are eternal and unchangeable. With fear, because of their power and dominion. With reverence and love because of their justice. Yet men count immortality, which no touch can achieve, and also power, which depends mostly upon fortune. While they disregard virtue, the only godlike attribute which it is in our power to obtain. Not reflecting that when a man is in a position of great power and authority, he will appear like a god if he acts justly, and like a wild beast if he does not. VII. The character of Aristides for justice at first made him beloved by the people, but afterwards it gained him their will, chiefly because Themistocles circulated reports that Aristides had practically closed the public courts of PG 74, justice by the fact of all cases being referred to him as arbitrator, and that he was virtually king of Athens, although he had not yet surrounded himself with a bodyguard. By this time the common people, elated with a victory at Marathon, and thinking themselves capable of the greatest exploits, were pleased at any private citizen being exalted above the rest by his character and virtues. They flocked into the city from all parts of the country and ostracized Aristides, veiling their envy of his glory under the pretense that they feared he would make himself king. This custom of ostracism was not intended as a punishment for crime, but was called, in order to give it a plausible title, a check to excessive power. In reality, it was nothing more than a safety valve, providing a vent for the dislike felt by the people for those whose greatness offended them. It did no irreparable injury to those who fell under its operation, but only banished them for a space of 10 years. In later times mean and contemptible persons were subjected to ostracism, until at last, after the ostracism of Hyperbolus the practice was discontinued. The ostracism of Hyperbolus is said to have been brought about in the following manner. Alcibiades and Nicias, the two most powerful citizens in the state, were at the head of two rival parties. The people determined to apply the ostracism to them, and would certainly have banished one or the other of them. They, however, came to terms with one another, combined their several factions, and agreed to have Hyperbolus banished. The people, enraged at this, and thinking that they had been treated with contempt, abolished the practices of ostracism. The way in which it was conducted was as follows. Each man took an oyster shell, wrote upon it the name of the citizen whom he wished to be banished, and then carried it to a place in the marketplace which was fenced off with palings. The archons now first of all counted the whole number of shells. For if the whole number of voters were less than 6,000, the ostracism was null and void. After this, they counted the number of times each name occurred, and that man against whom most votes were recorded they sent into exile for 10 years, allowing him the use of his property during that time. Now while the shells were being written upon, on the PG 75, occasion of which we have been speaking, a very ignorant country fellow is said to have brought his shell to Aristides, who was one of the bystanders, and to have asked him to write upon it the name of Aristides. Aristides was surprised, and asked him whether Aristides had ever done him any harm. No, answered the man, nor do I know him by sight, but I am tired of always hearing him called the Just. When Aristides heard this he made no answer, but wrote his name on the man's shell and gave it back to him. When he was leaving the city he raised his hands to heaven, and prayed exactly the opposite prayer to that of Achilles, that no crisis might befall the Athenians which would compel them to remember Aristides. However, 3 years afterwards, when Xerxes was advancing upon Attica through Thessaly and Phrygia, the Athenians annulled their decree, and permitted all exiles to return, being especially afraid of Aristides, lest he should join the enemy and lead many of the citizens to desert with him. In this they took a very false view of his character, for even before this decree he had never ceased to encourage the Greeks to defend their liberty, and after his return, when Themistocles was in sole command of the forces of Athens, he assisted him in every way by word and deed, cheerfully raising his bitterest enemy to the highest position in the state, because the state was benefited thereby. When Eurydice and his party were meditating a retreat from Salamis, the Persian ships put to sea at night and had them in, surrounding both the strait and the islands. No one knew that escape was impossible, but Aristides sailed from Ina, passed safely through the enemy's fleet by a miracle, and while it was still night proceeded straight to the tent of Themistocles. Here he called him out, and when they were alone together, he said, "We too, Themistocles, if we are wise, must cease our vain and silly rivalry with one another, and begin a more generous contest to preserve our country, you acting as general in chief, while I help and advise you. Already I perceive that you alone take a right view of the crisis, and desire to fight a battle in the narrow waters as quickly as possible. Now, while your allies have been PG 76, opposing you, the enemy have been playing your game, for the sea, both in our front and rear, is full of their ships, so that the Greeks even against their will must play the man and fight. For no way of escape is left for them." To this Themistocles answered, "I would not willingly, Aristides, be overcome by you in generosity on this occasion. And I shall endeavor, in emulation of this good beginning which you have made, to surpass you by the glory of my exploits." At the same time he explained the trick 20, which he had played on the barbarian, and begged Aristides to argue with Eurydice, and point out how impossible it was for the Greeks to be saved without fighting. For he thought that the opinion of Aristides would have more weight than his own. Consequently, when the assembly of the generals Cleocritus the Corinthian attacked Themistocles, and said that even Aristides did not approve of his plans, because he was present and said nothing, Aristides answered that he would not have been silent if Themistocles had not spoken to the purpose, but that as it was he held his peace, not for any love toward him, but because his counsel was the best. IX. While the Greek admirals were engaged in these discussions, Aristides, perceiving that Psytalia, a small island in the straits near Salamis, was full of the enemy, placed some of the boldest Athenians on board of small boats, attacked the Persians, and slew them to a man, except a few of the chiefs, who were taken alive. Among these were the 3 children of Sandoc, the sister of the Persian king, whom he at once sent to Themistocles, and it is said that in accordance with some oracle they were sacrificed to Dionysus Onnestes, 21, at the instance of the prophet Euphrates. Aristides now lined the shores of the island with soldiers, ready to receive any vessel which might be cast upon it, in order that neither any of his friends might be lost, nor any of the enemy take refuge upon it. Indeed, the severest encounter between the two fleets and the main shock of the battle seems PG 77 to have taken place at that spot. Wherefore the trophy that marks the victory stands on the island Psytalia. After the battle was won, Themistocles, wishing to feel Aristides' opinion, said to him that they had done a good work, but that a greater one remained, which was to shut up Asia and Europe by sailing as quickly as possible to the Hellespont, and destroying the bridge of boats there. Aristides answered that he must never propose such a plan, but must take measures to drive the Persians out of Greece as quickly as possible, for fear that so great a multitude, shut up there without the means of retreat, should turn today and attack them with the courage of despair. Upon this, Themistocles had instantly left Aeneas, a prisoner, on a secret errand to tell the Persian king that when all the Greeks wished to sail to the Hellespont and destroy the bridge of boats, he had dissuaded them from doing so, wishing to save the king's life. X. The Xerxes became terrified, and at once hurried back to the Hellespont. Mardonius, with about 300,000 of the best troops, remained behind, and was a formidable enemy, trusting in his land force, and sending defiant proclamations to the Greeks. You, he said, with your ships have beaten landsmen that knew not how to handle an oar. But the land of Thessaly is wide, and the plain of Phthia is a fair place for good horsemen and heavy armed soldiers to fight upon. To the Athenians he sent privately proposals from the great king, who offered to rebuild their city, present them with a large sum of money, and make them lords over all Greece, if they would desist from the war. The Lacedaemonians, hearing this, were much alarmed, and sent ambassadors to beg the Athenians to send their wives and children to Sparta, an offering to support their own people, as the Athenians were in great distress for food, having lost their city and their country. However, after listening to the Lacedaemonian ambassadors, at the instance of Aristides they returned a spirited answer, saying that they could forgive their enemies, who knew no better, for supposing that everything could be bought with money, but that they were angry with the Lacedaemonians for only regarding the present poverty and distress of the PG-70 Athenians, and that forgetting how bravely they had fought, they should now offer them food to bribe them to fight for Greece. Having passed this motion, Aristides called the ambassadors back into the assembly, and bade them tell the Lacedaemonians that there was not as much gold in the world, either above or underground, as the Athenians would require to tempt them to betray Greece. In answer to the herald sent from Mardonius, he pointed to the sun, and said,
bringing this
"As
round
long
to a
as yonder sun
close.
shall
Thanks for
continue
tuning
its course, the Athenians
in,
will be enemies to the Persians,
and
because of
I'll
their
get back on
ravishments
as
and
soon as I
desecrated temples."
can.
Further, he made the priests
Until
invoke curses
then,
on anyone who had dealings with the
keep
Persians who
blessed.
deserted the Greek cause.